Well, good. Since the meeting's being recorded, we don't need a quorum for this part of the meeting. So can I go ahead and get started? So I'll call this closed session meeting to order. At this time, we will invite public comments regarding the closed session agenda items only, and we will accept them at this time. Is there anybody in the public that would like to address the closed session? You don't see anybody tomorrow?
I don't see anybody. Hold on, give me 1 second, please.
Okay.
I don't see anybody raising their hand at this moment.
Okay. Well, here, seeing that there's nobody to address us, I'll close this session and we'll reopen in closed session in a couple of minutes. So see you there. I see that there's 4 council members present, and so I'm just going to go ahead and start the meeting. I'd like to start this meeting today, call it to order on September the 8th on 2020 at 5:35 p.m. With that, I'll turn it over to Tamara, who's going to be giving instructions for following the meeting today. Tamara?
All right, good evening, council, mayor and council. I want to go over our Guatemala City Council instructions for a Zoom webinar. This is not a regular Zoom meeting, is a webinar, and it works slightly different than most meetings that we are accustomed to on a daily basis now. This is being done in an effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19 or encourage members of the public to participate in the council meetings via video conferencing. They can do that utilizing our Zoom link or video streaming on the city's website, and that has been available before COVID, as well as channel 70 and channel 99 in our cable channels, as well as now on Facebook Live. All our council meetings are available. I want to share with the council and the public that we have worked to improve access to links for our council meetings. And if you open our website, the first thing that you will see on the Tuesday of council meetings is basically an easy to access Zoom link or phone numbers if you desire to call in the meeting, or if you want to use the QR code that also takes you to the meeting link, as well as a link to the agenda. So all that is available as you open our website. In terms of for an enhanced meeting experience, I want to recommend to members of the public that are joining us today that they enable we have enabled the panelist gallery view to ensure that you can see the PowerPoint as well as all the panelists, or the council in this case, during the meeting. In order to take advantage of this feature, it's important that you as a user, if you're using a computer, that you go on top of the screen and you select this side-by-side view mode. If you do that, you will be able to see the PowerPoint as well as the speakers. We've also are using an enhanced timer window that will be available today during public comment. And you will also have the ability to display your camera if you so wish during public comment. And for that, we recommend that you let the clerk know if you would like to utilize your camera during the time that you will be speaking to the council. And then the clerk will enable your camera, and it will take a moment, so you will see your screen switching, and then you'll be able to speak with the video enabled. I just want to go over very briefly as how the council discussion works for different agenda items on tonight's agenda. The council will first receive a staff report. The recommended actions for the council are listed on the staff report as well as on today's agenda. After the conclusion of the staff report, the council will have an ability to ask clarifying questions of the staff member on the item being discussed. And after that, the mayor will call for public input after each item. The public may have questions. I just want to make sure that is understood that those questions may not be responded during the meeting. Upon closing of the public input, the mayor will ask the council for a motion, and that will allow for further discussion and deliberation on the item until the council makes their final vote. In terms for the council members, the way this work is very simple. The mayor will be calling on council members on rotational basis just to ask for clarifying questions after the staff report. Council members wanting to speak may signal to the mayor by raising their own hand, just like this. And after clarifying questions and public input, council members will have one more opportunity to being called by the mayor, also in a rotational basis, to continue discussing the item. Now I want to take a moment to provide instructions to the public for public input. Members of the public will have 3 minutes to speak on items that are not on today's agenda at the beginning of the meeting. But the public will also have 3 minutes to address the council for public input during each item discussed in today's agenda. The clerk will announce the time for public input during each item. And we ask that the public help this process by entering their full name into Zoom so that we can call upon them appropriately. Please, at the beginning of your time, let the clerk know if you would like to enable your camera so that can happen prior to you starting to speak. Announce your name and your address. Help us by minimizing any background noise. And also we ask that you pay attention to the timer that is being disclosed in your screen. This is a very important, this item, next item is very important because like I said, it's different than regular Zoom meetings that we all participate on daily basis. This is a Zoom webinar. So if you're in your computer, I will encourage the public to use this icon here to raise your hand. So you can just simply click raise your hand, and that will signal the clerk that you are wishing to speak on that item when public input becomes available. And if you are on the phone, you can also raise your hand. You will not be able to unmute your phone unless you signify that you are raising your hand, and the clerk will do it. And you do that by pressing *9. So if you're on the phone, please press *9, not to unmute, but to raise your hand. And that concludes the instructions, Mayor. Hopefully this will be an easier and enhanced experience for all of us.
Very good. Thank you very, very much. So that we'll start now with a roll call.
Hoffman Gomez,
Here.
Estrada,
Here.
Gonzalez,
Here.
Hernandez, Hurst,
Here.
Parker,
Here.
Garcia.
Here. Okay, moving on. Pledge allegiance. Ari, could you lead us in allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag, United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. You may be seated.
Thank you, Ari. Moving on, we have informational items. First, we have miscellaneous documents report that I'm sure each one of the council members review. We do have written reports by one council member. Councilmember Aurelio submitted a report on the Salvation Army, and also in terms of the CAB updates. Moving on, we have presentations and oral communications. This is time for oral communications from the public. The public has 3 minutes to speak on any item that is not on the agenda. So with that, is there anybody that would like to speak to the council at this time? And please raise your hand so you can be recognized.
Nancy, this is your turn to speak. You may speak now.
Good evening. I just wanted to update you on the Powder River Watershed Flood Prevention Authority, also known as the PRW FPA. That's another group that has to do with the levee. And we had a meeting on Friday, September 4th. That group is composed of the supervisors and water district people, the leaders from Santa Cruz, Monterey, Santa Clara, and San Benito County. And Mark Strudley gave another report and an update on the progress and where we are, and he spoke about that we have federal funding and state funding, and those of you on the finance committee know we're still trying to work on funding from our local people. We are not sure of the amount yet. At the meeting, Director Caput made a suggestion that each county should put in $1 million to help alleviate our amounts for our local people, but every county basically responded with they have their own fiscal problems right now, so that didn't seem to be that we're going to make much progress in that area. The other thing that we talked about was you know, people keep talking about, well, we just need to dredge the river. If we dredge the river, we're going to be okay, and just need to clean out that channel. And really, that's a Band-Aid approach. I think we need to focus on the future, and the future is new levees. So that concludes my remarks. I just wanted to give you a brief update. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy, for your continued service. Is there anybody else that would wish to speak to the council? Please raise your hand.
Keith, this is your time to speak. You may address the council now.
Great. Quick sound check. And
You can unmute your, okay.
quick sound check. Can the council hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Keith Otto, county resident. I want to go back to an item from your June 23rd meeting, the council resolution rather, to advocate for passenger rail. First, let me say that I've had a chance to meet many of you and your predecessors at various past community events, such as the Empty Bowls fundraiser for Pajaro Valley Loaves and Fishes and the Quila Awards Dinner, which one year was actually held right here at Pajaro Valley High School. The point is, there are many places where we come together and can agree regarding the best use of the rail corridor. There are some places there too where we may agree. One place that I hope we all agree is that facts matter. The city of Watsonville is in an enviable position to have 2 members of the city council on the County Regional Transportation Commission. In the city council discussion on June 23rd regarding the resolution to urge the RTC to implement passenger rail, one of the council members who's on the RTC stated that funding for passenger rail comes from Measure D, that it's money that's already being designated for that it's not going to be more taxes, that it's not going to be more money. These statements are a fundamental disconnect from the facts. I can't say strongly enough that it's so disappointing to hear such incorrect and false statements being made. It's even more disappointing that they're made by a member of the RTC. And it's further disappointing that another city council member who's also on the RTC was present, would have heard these statements, and did not jump in to make a correction. Wow. Just to be clear, the November 2016 County Measure D expenditure plan for the rail corridor states measure revenues do not include funding for any new train rail service. So where do we go from here? Statements made on the June 23rd meeting were so incorrect that a formal statement of correction should be issued and done in such a manner where the public will see it. Let us know when we can expect this to occur. And then from there, it's up to the council to decide if any of this matters to you all and if it changes your position on the resolution. Perhaps you're all in regardless of the cost. The cost, by the way, the best numbers that we have to date are from the RTC Unified Corridor Investment Study. The various projects in the rail corridor add up to a whopping $844 million. The electric passenger rail component alone is $474 million of that number, and it's unknown how we are going to pay for all of this. Consider this when you ponder your own city budget challenges. Details matter, facts matter. Let's get it right and communicate correct information in the council and to the public. Thanks for listening. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Keith, and we will follow up on that. Anybody else would like to speak to the council on items not on the agenda? Please signify by raising your hand.
Mayor, I don't see any more hands up. So at this point, you are welcome to close the public comment.
Okay, moving on then, it is time now for oral communications from the council, and we each have 2 minutes, and we'll start with Ari.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to, I'm going to keep it extremely brief. I thank everyone for their efforts in helping with the fire, and all the people from our area here, our teachers and aides and staff from the Pajaro Valley Unified School District. I thank them all for helping support all those people that have had to transition out of their home for the last 2 to 3 weeks, and some of them are still in that red zone. And people here in Watsonville are amazing and supportive. And I want to show a great appreciation for getting through this last weekend without being able to go to the beaches and be out there. Watsonville stood tall again, and it was hot. It was tough, and people did wonderful things with their families, and they masked and they were about. So I just want to say thank you. Under extreme circumstances, one after another, we seem to be continuing to be positive in our community. So thank you very much, and keep on trucking, Watsonville.
Thank you, Ari. Moving on to Trina.
Thank you, Mayor. One thing I want to bring up is Monterey Bay Community Power has changed their name to Central Coast Community Power. as we have incorporated 5 counties in the state of California. We're the largest jurisdiction of the community choice aggregate. We are having a lot of robust discussion, especially as you hear about CAISO, which is really when you hear about these rolling blackouts. So keep that in mind of what our local organization is here doing for our community and our goals that we're setting in place in terms of our greenhouse gas emission and green energy. We have a 50% goal by 2025, and I think a 100% goal by 2030 for us to be completely completely green in terms of the energy generation. A lot of that also will have to factor into getting in some of the new resources and construction projects in order for us to go ahead and generate the green, the clean energy. So it's been a very robust conversation that we've had recently that was adopted by more jurisdictions that are now incorporated into this with our new job title. And perhaps we can also get an updated presentation at some point with our future council to discuss this and how it reflects and plays into our green plan here that we have for our climate action plan. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina. Moving on to Paco.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to apologize for missing the last city council. I was busy with my wife and I had our first child, so you know, life has been a little different, a little more hectic, but much happier for sure. And I wanted to echo what my colleague, Councilwoman Parker, said about thanking the community for stepping up when our county neighbors needed it the most. At home, there are many groups that I just want to thank for doing a number of things, from raising funds, food collection, food distribution, supplies, clothing. All of you deserve a big thank you for stepping up as well and helping your community when they most needed it. We're still in the middle of COVID, so please, if you need information, if you're not sure what to do, the city of Watsonville has been working with community partners. We've been creating content. It's on our website. It's in Spanish, it's in English, and it's in Mixteco. And so if you still can't find the answer that you're looking for, please feel free to email any one of us on the city council or staff with your questions, and we'll get you the answer. And just a big thank you to our firefighters who are up there fighting the good fight right now and trying to make sure that we get these fires out, we get people back home, and hopefully we can heal and move forward together soon. And so I just want a big thank you to our crew and our chief that is, I know, working very hard. Thank you.
Thank you, Paco. Moving on to Lowell.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I want to welcome everybody to my kitchen, and because it is a kitchen, there are some background noises occurring, but there's been a lot of activity in the kitchen over the years, and this is the table where a lot of things hatch and get distributed. So I want to first of all thank our police and fire for their outstanding work under these unprecedented circumstances and situations. Many people are still suffering and will suffer for a significantly long time, and that's unfortunate. I want to thank our EOC staff and all the volunteers that have helped out throughout the community. My wife made some trips with the Seroptimus gals to the EOC and passed out some gift cards and some other donations to the community. We've had an unprecedented air quality event, lots of smoke, lots of heat. People say they don't need any air conditioning in Watsonville, but it was pretty warm, at least in my house. How about going from purple to red? That's a big step and a big improvement. And so let's keep on the right track with, moving to orange or pink or another color. Let's get through the COVID. Let's get through the emergencies. let's stick together and hang tight together. That's it for me, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Lowell. Moving on to Aurelio.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to just reiterate everything that my fellow city councilmen said. Big shout out to all our farm workers out there, and to all those that are helping and going out there also and giving them their appreciation for their hard work. But you know, this includes the whole community. Give a shout out to everybody from the fire to police to teachers. Teachers are you know, really working hard to do their best with distance learning, as such as our children are too. It's a challenge. It's a tremendous challenge, but I think as a community, if we stick together, we can hopefully overcome this. And just like Lowell said, and Paco, you know, COVID is still here. We need to be cautious. We need to keep our distance, put our masks on, stay safe for each other so we can move on forward in the colors, and we can get our kids back into their classrooms. I think that's, as a community, that's one of the goals that we should set for ourselves, is let's work together to improve and move on the colors so our children can go back to school and have a good mental health instead of this having to deal with this isolation that we're all having to deal with. And those that, for the heat, remember, drink water, stay hydrated. Those with conditions of breathing, those that have had COVID, be cautious out there. The air is not the best for us right now. So stay safe, and I will pass it on. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Aurelio. I have next Felipe, but I don't see him on my screen. Is Felipe available? Matt, could you do me a favor and text Felipe to see what's going on with him, okay? Moving on, I'll go ahead and do my report then. I did attend several meetings over the past few weeks. I attended a meeting for the Housing Authority, an overdose awareness workshop, a COPA House meeting, a voting matters meeting, a youth violence prevention network meeting. But what I want to focus on is that I want to give you an update on the process for selecting the ad hoc committee for policing. We received 26 applications, but one withdrew and the other one was a day late. Council members Paco, Aurelio, and I have received the 24 applications to review. And with that, we also received a 7-point spreadsheet with 4 categories to give points to select our top 12. Those selections are due today, so hopefully we have already forward that information to Tamara, who's going to tally it. And then this Friday, September 11th, we will be meeting with Matt and staff to determine that those selected are actually diverse and representative of our community. Soon after we select the committee members, we will establish a schedule for meetings, and at that time we will invite the community to participate in our communities as we move forward. So with that, that concludes my report. Is Felipe on yet?
Yes, Mayor. Felipe just joined the meeting, so if you allow a few seconds while he gets situated.
Okay. Okay, I see Felipe. Go ahead and give your report, Felipe.
I have none for today.
Okay, that's fine. We'll be moving on then. Are there any reports out of closed session?
Yes, there are, Mayor. Thank you very much. There were 2 items, conference with the labor negotiator and personnel matters. There's never a report on performance evaluation because it's a personnel matter. And there was no final action with the labor negotiator because I would have had to be there, and so it was only half of it. So that didn't happen, which is, so the public knows. And then there were 2 pieces of litigation, Evangelina Ortega versus the city and Richard Stockton versus the county and the city. And on both those items, the council authorized special counsel to file responsive pleadings and report back to the council at appropriate times. That concludes my report.
Thank you, Ellen. Moving forward then, now we have city manager's update.
Okay, thank you, Mayor. Bear with me for one moment while I bring up the presentation. Okay, can everyone see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, very good. Well, good evening, council and mayor and community members. I appreciate the opportunity to provide you all with another update during these very extraordinary times that we find ourselves in. As we have been, I wanted to start with an update on COVID-19 within our region. We have been now, it's hard to believe, responding to the pandemic for over 7 months as an organization. And we're now unfortunately continuing to see that COVID remains prevalent in our community, although with some positive news announced today by County Health that I'll share here in a moment. But cases have now recorded 6.3 million confirmed cases throughout the country, 1,931 cases within the County of Santa Cruz. Of those, 1,700 have recovered, 198 active cases as of today. Unfortunately, 7 deaths confirmed, and about 1,078 cases in Watsonville. As we've stated in the past, the largest age group continues to be those between the years of 18 to 34. And many of those individuals are contracting the disease through person-to-person contact, social gatherings, family gatherings, and the like. And unfortunately, we know that Watsonville, along with many communities of color and Latino communities, are being disproportionately impacted by the virus for a number of reasons. Latinos represent 62% of all cases. So as a couple of the council members have mentioned during their updates today, last week the state announced a new blueprint for a safer economy. They're shifting away from the monitoring list that they've been using for the last several weeks, and they are now using a 4-tiered, colored, and very stringent reopening structure. So as was shared, there was some positive news today that the County of Santa Cruz has moved out of the strictest tier, the purple tier, to the red tier, which is still identified as substantial. It still means that we are community where COVID continues to be prevalent. And there was a major caveat when the county and the state announced that we had changed from purple to red, and that's with, unfortunately, the evacuations and the displacement of over 45,000 people in our community due to the fire. They're already starting to see that cases are ticking up again, and they suspect that within a 14-day period, there will unfortunately be a good chance that we return back to the purple tier within that time frame. Again, circumstances beyond anyone's control. I know that as many safeguards were put in place as possible to avoid the spread at shelters and as folks were sheltering in place with friends and loved ones. But it unfortunately looks like it's going to be an outcome of that displacement. And we are in close coordination with County Health to monitor those numbers as we go forward. So what this means is it continues to be a back and forth of closing and reopening of the economy. Moving into the red area does mean that effective today, a number of businesses can re-engage their indoor operations. Gyms, nail salons, personal care businesses for the time being can reopen indoor operations with protective measures. Of course, if we do end up moving back to the purple tier in the next couple of weeks, that could change. And so we will continue to work as best we can to help our small businesses navigate this somewhat confusing environment. Our staff continue to invest significant time and resources into supporting risk mitigation and communication efforts tailored for the South County area. This work has involved numerous local organizations, and many of the videos, materials, and social media posts were produced by our graphic design and communication staff, who continue to do a really outstanding job as we seek to inform our community. Of course, over the last few weeks, much of our county's attention has been on battling and supporting the CZU Lightning Fire Complex in North Santa Cruz County, again, displacing and relocating thousands of families. The County Emergency Operations Center has been focused on recovery and repopulation efforts over the last several days, focusing on debris removal and structural integrity issues as they try to get families back into the area and start moving down the difficult path of reopening. Current shelters that remain open include the Seventh-day Adventist, the Fairgrounds, and Simpkins Community Center. Additionally, there are many evacuees at different campgrounds and hotels throughout the region. The county also announced that the KP Arena has been redeployed as a recovery center. It's open 7 days a week from 11 to 7 p.m. And it has incredibly been serving over 2,000 people a day since being activated. So as was mentioned earlier by many of the council members in your updates, Watsonville has continued to provide mutual aid assistance in a number of ways, from our fire and police departments to assisting with care and shelter. Our public works and parks and recreation teams have been assisting anywhere they can, as well as our airports supporting CAL FIRE air operations. And really my hat goes off to all of our firefighters, police officers, many employees, and many community members that have stepped up in a big way to help our neighbors to the north. Unfortunately, many homes have been lost and nearly 90,000 acres burned. Our prayers and thoughts continue to be with the victims of the fire as they navigate a difficult process of rebuilding down the road. The Watsonville Donation Center continues to be in operation between 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. Monday through Saturday. Right now, there's an urgent need for bottled water, and they have a call out for anyone willing to make donations. This is a result of the impact the fire is having on the quality of the water supply for many communities in North Santa Cruz County. And they're having a hard time keeping up with the demand. So if anyone wants to make contributions, you can do so at the Santa Cruz location on Emmeline or at the donation center in Watsonville. And we appreciate your efforts to continue supporting victims of the fire. I also want to note that monetary donations are also being accepted by the Santa Cruz Community Foundation, and you can find a link on their website with that information. That, of course, would be much appreciated. So as Mayor Garcia mentioned earlier, the process for the Ad Hoc Committee on Policing and Social Equity is underway. Applications are being reviewed by the council committee members, and each application will be screened for residency as well. Final selections will be made over the next week. And the council ad hoc is also in the process of reviewing qualified facilitators to help assist with the overall process, working alongside the committee once it's formed. So more information to come on that. Last month, in response to community concerns regarding the placement of the George Washington bust in the plaza, the Parks and Recreation Commission held a study session to collect additional input from the community. As you might suspect, it was well attended with a long, robust discussion about the future of the statue within the plaza. As a result of that input, staff developed a bilingual community survey that is now open until September 30th. And we really encourage all members of the community that have strong feelings on the topic to take a few minutes to fill out the survey, share your thoughts. We have the link on our website as well as the URL code you see in front of you. You can simply take a picture of that with your phone and it will bring you to the survey as we try to make this conversation as accessible to as many community members as we can. As Dr. Bilicic mentioned earlier this evening, through the culmination of work over the last 20 years and beyond, we're making progress in moving forward with much needed repairs to the Pajaro River levee, representing really a major milestone. And I want to really credit Jackie McLeod and Steve Palmisano and the many community members and county support to get us to this point. The levee project is federally funded through the Army Corps in the amount of about $1.8 million to start pre-construction and engineering and design of the levee. The County of Santa Cruz Flood Control District, Zone 7, and Monterey County Water Resources Agency are actively working on an agreement to begin work. Staff is awaiting a timeline for implementation, and that was a major milestone as well to have the pre-construction and design work funded. We were very excited to hear that news. City, county, and the Water Resources Agency have been working on a finance and government strategy to plan for the $400 million construction phase of the levee project. The funding will include federal and state grants as well as local funding strategies. And there is significant work and conversations to come on that topic, but encouraging progress. It's crunch time on the census. Our census team has been working around the clock to encourage all community members to be counted. We spent quite a bit of work over the last couple of weeks, reaching out to our farm worker community, going out to the fields with resources and education efforts to try to encourage all members of our community to be counted. The deadline is coming up at the end of this month. And so any effort you have or community members that are watching to encourage your friends and family members, please do so. This summer, the council approved a comprehensive update to the city's cannabis regulations, including the allowance of 2 retail cannabis dispensaries. Over the last several weeks, staff has been working with our cannabis consultant to develop a revamped application process based on the new ordinance. And the application window will be opening on September 15th. More information can be found on our website. And we encourage any businesses or interested applicants to contact the Community Development Department and visit our city website for more information. Despite today's challenges, the Downtown Specific Plan was relaunched last month with the project now nearly 90% funded through state grants, with the balance being covered by local city funding. This long-range planning effort will provide an opportunity for the community to weigh in on the future vision of downtown, including preserving what makes downtown Watsonville special. There will be a community meeting held on September 30th, and we encourage all members that are interested to participate in that. This will not be the only community meeting held on the topic. There will be many opportunities to participate along the way, and we'll continue to provide updates as those meetings occur. So on Tuesday, August 25th, the City Council approved a temporary eviction moratorium. This was really bringing back a moratorium that was approved last summer to help protect those families struggling with COVID-19 to shelter in place, despite the significant economic challenges that we're all continuing to embark on. Shortly thereafter, and we had anticipated that this may occur, the state legislature did end up taking action at the 9th hour to place a statewide overlay with rental protections. And I wanted to provide a little bit of an update to the council and to the community, because I know there's been a lot of interest in this topic. So just briefly, the state law stops evictions for tenants who owe rent between March 1st, 2020 and January 31st, 2021. Landlords can collect the rent in small claims court starting March 1st, 2021, after that point in time. The landlord obligations include, with every notice to pay rent, you must also notify tenants of their rights under AB 3088, state the amounts of rent overdue for each month, include a blank declaration that the tenants can return. And, clearly looking at the bill, there was compromises made between tenants and landlords, and there were some additional provisions built into the state order that was not in our local moratorium that I wanted to outline as well. All tenants must return the declaration within 15 days after they receive it from their landlord. Some tenants also need to pay some rent to qualify. Depends on which month's rent is outstanding. For rent due March 1st through 2020, August 31st, 2020, no requirement to pay rent to qualify for the protections, but it is not a rent forgiveness program. And I want to make that very clear that ultimately all rent will come due at some point in time. For rent due September 1st through January 31st, 2020, tenants must pay a minimum of 25% of the rent owed during that time period in order to qualify. So again, that was another change in the state law that required that rent due between September and January of 2020, that a tenant must start paying 25% of that at a minimum to try to keep up on their payments. So honoring our commitment and the council's request to inform the community, we have held 2 workshops already outlining the moratorium and what options the tenants have if they find themselves struggling due to COVID-19 impacts. As part of our continued outreach efforts, staff will hold another housing workshop on September 17th. We're starting to advertise that today. And this will serve as another opportunity for renters and families to ask questions of staff and get a better understanding of the tools and resources that are available to help them if they find themselves in that situation. I should also say that all of this work is being done in close coordination with many of our landlords. We're fortunate to have many responsible property managers and landlords in Watsonville that were already working through agreements with their tenants. And so this is an opportunity for us to come together as a community and try to weather this storm together. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. I appreciate the opportunity to give today's update.
So this is time for city council members to ask questions, and we'll start with Trina. Do you have any questions, Trina?
Yes.
We can't hear you, Trina.
Sorry. Can you describe the parameters of those that are putting a submission for the survey, this bus survey? I've had some comments that it's pretty intrusive to have a phone number and an address and an email and quite a bit of extra data. I mean, couldn't just the address be sufficient on this survey so that you know for sure?
Sorry, Councilmember Kaufman Gomez, there's an issue happening with your mic, but I think I caught the gist of it. So there has been some feedback regarding the level of detail that the survey is requesting. That's something that I'll be discussing with staff. I believe they're trying to strike the balance of collecting enough information to understand where the input is coming from, and also wanting to make sure that there's enough information for the Parks and Rec Commission and the council potentially to have a clearer picture of the full body of input. That's always a balance, of course, as well, and we don't want to discourage anyone from participating if they feel there's too much information being asked. And so we can review that and see if there's options.
Yeah, I can certainly see address, but a phone number, you're not going to be able to relate it to wherever the jurisdiction is, nor an email for that matter, unless you're asking for more feedback or a database to be corresponding with in some way. And I would certainly think that would be on a voluntary basis if they want to actually be part of a process for the future on that item. So that's why I'm hearing the concern.
Sure, I appreciate that. I appreciate that feedback.
You wanted some more, Trina? Go ahead.
Yes, I think that it's more discussion about the ordinance. When it comes to the language, I know that we're going to be discussing the future, the money, but when it comes to the requirements and the parameter of what application or the documentation purposes for the process, that came down with, a required document that's been completed between the tenant and the landlord so that we can be on the same page with either side of the equation when it comes to response for that, for tenant, forbearance of some sort or delay of.
Sure, Carlos will speak to that a little bit later on the housing item. I will just share that the state law preempts local moratoriums, so everything will be referring to the new state requirements, including the process that a tenant would need to go through if they're seeking assistance under the new state law. And I'm sure Carlos can provide more clarity once we get to that item later this evening.
And just one more comment, that if you can repeat the question back, because I'm hearing from people that they can't hear my question, and if And that may happen to me, it may happen to other council members as well. So we have clarity of the question and the answer. Thank you.
Thank you, Trina. Moving on to Paco, you have any questions?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Mayor. If I'm not mistaken, I remember reading something about the deadline for the census being being disputed, and you know, the claim is that the president can end it a month early. Do you know where that is going, Matt, or do you sort of feel like we will eventually have to wind it down this month, or are there prospects that we could keep the original timeline?
But there has been a legal challenge, Councilmember Estrada, that's making its way through the courts. It does sound as though a judge will be making a decision on it prior to that September 30th deadline. We have really no reason to believe that that will be successful at this point, and so it's full charge ahead. If it does happen to occur and there's an extension of the deadline, that's great. It gives us more time to continue doing our work, but it's certainly not something that we can count on at this point. And of course, the frustrating piece is that the deadline alone has already caused some disruption and some distrust of the process. So it has certainly made the job harder of trying to increase that count.
Okay, thank you for that answer, and I'm hopefully just encourage the council, the city staff, and everyone to every day blast out the reminder to please fill out the census. I mean, if we only have until this month, let's just finish strong and then hopefully hope for the best. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Paco. Moving on, Lowell, do you have any questions?
I just want to thank the city staff and Matt in particular for giving us this review and bringing the public up to speed. You know, we've got a lot on our plate. The electronic versions of our meetings don't always work as well as we might like for them to do. Sometimes the in-person ones don't work as well as we might like as well. But we're going to get through this if folks stick with us and we stick with them. And I just feel bad for all the folks out there that have been displaced and are suffering, and you know, we need to have more understanding and compassion and assistance to them as well. And so just thank all the parties that are making things better. That's it.
Thank you, Lowell. Aurelio, do you have any questions?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, I have a question in regards to the eviction moratorium. We had some real estate agency question on the utilities and what's owed by the tenants, and if it's going to be waived, because my understanding is if the tenant doesn't pay the utilities, then the landlords can't rent out the unit until the utilities are paid. How are we addressing this issue?
Thank you, Councilmember Gonzalez. So we did have a public comment come in this afternoon from Kathy Oliver with Oliver Property Management, raising some concerns given the current pace at which we have outstanding utility payments. It's always the case that we have some level of outstanding payment. It's typically closer to 200 to 250,000. It's now getting closer to 500,000 due to the challenges that I think a lot of our residents are facing. The way the process typically works is our utility team strive to collect those outstanding payments from the tenant. And there's a number of ways that they do that to try to achieve compliance, even as a rental space may be turning over. There are cases in which they're unsuccessful in doing that. And ultimately, the unpaid utility does stay with the property. It's a special benefit that the property and the property owner are receiving. In this case, by extension through their tenant. But we also understand the feedback we're getting from some landlords of saying there are times when their tenant is delinquent, but they were not made aware or they didn't realize that that was occurring. So we're talking through ways that we can help to bridge that communication gap. One way is revising the account activation process. So when someone comes in to open up a new account, asking for more information, so we have both information for the tenant and the property owner. So if at any point their account is no longer in good standing or they have outstanding payments, that both the property owner and a landlord would be notified. The other thing we've talked about offering is kind of an opt-in process for any property owner today that has tenants in place, that if they want to opt into a notification, if their tenant falls delinquent, then they would also receive a notification so that they could work with their tenant to resolve those issues before that outstanding bill grows too large. But yes, that is the case. I think a lot of this could be solved with providing more opportunities for landlords to understand exactly where their tenants are in the process. We have place to stay on shutoffs for the time being, not wanting to have a situation where individuals are required to shelter in place, they're falling behind on their bill, and at the same time being told to stay home, losing their utility access. And so that's the decision that a lot of utilities have made. I can tell you that in conversations with some of the other utility districts, they're starting to roll that back now and starting to move back to doing shutoffs for delinquent accounts to keep those outstanding accounts from getting too large. And as more of the economy starts going back to work and more individuals are leaving the home, that's a decision that we're going to have to face, I think, as well in the near future. So that's a long-winded answer, but we were aware of those concerns and we're working to resolve them.
Thank you. One more question, actually. I'd just like to request, I know my fellow city council member, Trina Kaufman Gomez, requested if the questions that she asked could be restated. Could the city clerk restate her questions just for the record?
We can try to do that going forward. I don't know that Beatrice caught that question, but if we start having that issue on other items, then we can try to restate those for the record.
Okay, moving on. Felipe, you have any questions? Is that silence meaning no, you don't have any questions, Felipe? Well, I don't even see him on the screen. Anyway, I have one question, and it has to do with assistance for those needing whatever type of assistance, whether it's healthcare or rent or electricity. But I don't know if I dreamt this or I read it, because some of my dreams are real. They're real to me. Did I hear correctly or read correctly that there's some way that the city is working with the Santa Cruz County Foundation to provide assistance to some of our residents?
So there is assistance being provided in a number of ways, Mayor. One of those is the Santa Cruz Community Foundation has stepped up to offer a number of resources for both documented and undocumented individuals that are struggling under the circumstances. We have also set up a landing page on our website that brings a number of those resources together and makes it easier to find resources for housing, resources for small businesses, resources for residents seeking support services. And many of those programs are offered in partnership with our community organizations, including Community Action Board, for one example. And we continue to update that and refresh it as we move forward. The county's website for COVID-19 resources also has a number of excellent resources, and as part of their CARES funding, they've received $27 million and established some additional support programs. So yes, our city website, the county website, and Community Foundation are all good places for community members to look for help.
Very good. Thank you very much. I'll go back to see if Felipe, are you there, Felipe, to ask any questions?
And you also forgot me, but that's okay.
You know, I did, Ari. I needed to go back to the top of my list. Ari, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Okay, let me jump in. And I don't have very much because I had two questions and they were great questions, but they were well answered. One of them was about a legal challenge to census. So I think Councilman Estrada. And the other one had to do with what Councilman Gonzalez asked too. So I just wanted also to talk a little bit about this format and the webinar with Facebook. I wanted to give you a positive feedback because I got positive feedback from a whole bunch of people who never, ever watch city council meetings, and they said, hey, it was so easy. I just clicked on it and you guys were all talking, and they didn't stay too long, I don't think, or they bopped back in and out whenever they found it to be interesting. But I think it's probably the best one we've had so far when it comes to platforms and the ease in which the public can access it. So I wanted to say thank you to our staff and our city manager Huffaker for making those decisions. And that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Hari. I'll go back to Felipe. Felipe, are you there? Okay, not hearing from Felipe, then it's time for public input. Is there anybody in the public that would like to make comments about the report by our city manager? Please raise your hand.
Mayor, I
Yes.
would like to remind the public to raise their hand. And if they're joining us by phone, to press *9. And if they want their camera on, to let us know as soon as they start speaking. The timer will be appearing on one of the screens called City Council Meetings. And if they want to view the council members, to change their viewing option on their device to gallery or side by side. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Beatrice. With that, then, are there any community members that would like to address this topic on the city manager's update?
Ellie, it's now your turn to speak. Thank you.
Hi, yes, hello, my name is Elizabeth. I'm from District 7. I'd like to agree with Trina. There's way too many questions that discourage people from entering the Washington survey. I'd like to also ask what is being done for farm workers during the smoke and this heat. I know you guys really love that red tape and the farms are out of the city limits, but the buses, I see them going through downtown. They're packed with our community members. They're packed to the gills. Most of them are not wearing masks. So what is the city doing? I've asked this before to Matt and I still haven't gotten an answer. And you know, it's really discouraging. You attend the last meeting and you ask for accountability. You ask, why isn't Matt emailing us back? Why is Matt giving us these blanket answers? And the council, instead of being like, yo, Matt, why is community members upset? You all just pat each other on the back. So who keeps Matt accountable? You guys are all just like, you're doing great. Community's upset. Who cares? You're the best one we've got. So that discourages community from even saying anything or even coming to these meetings. It's coming to a point where it's exhausting to try to speak to y'all because you just ignore anything that we have to say and then you just pat each other in the back. Okay, I agree. I can see everybody today for the first time on a Zoom call. That's great. I still can't see how many community members are here. I still can't see who's here with me, who I can reach out to. And like Manuel Bersamin said, if you guys were on the other end, you would have a bigger problem with this. So privilege is not when you think something is not a problem because it's not a problem to you personally. And I think the entire council is privileged when you keep us silent and you don't allow us to see each other. You don't allow us to communicate with each other via the chat. You listen to us. I'm clearly upset. I get anxiety talking to you guys at this point. And what do? You smirk at us, you laugh at us, and then you pat each other on the back. And all we want to do is get involved. All we want to do, what are you doing, Lo? Are you mocking me? Like, see what I mean? Like, how do we continue this? Like, how do we build a relationship with y'all when this is how you speak to us? How do we build a relationship with y'all when you just dismiss us? Like, we want to get involved and this is how you treat us. Like, we don't know what we're doing. Hiding behind the Brown Act is yet another piece of red tape. You are holding us not, oh, Lowell, you are so frustrating because everything that comes out of your mouth is borderline racist and just screams of privilege. And now you're just mocking me as I'm speaking. See what I'm saying? Like, this is not community building. It's so freaking rude and dismissive. It's like, do your job, dismantle white supremacy on your own. It's not going to be comfortable, but you need to do it. Your proximity to whiteness is not going to save you either. Your power in this council will eventually end, and you'll have to deal with your, like, you guys are so rude when all we want to do is get involved to the point that I get anxiety that I don't want to be involved. All of y'all, dude. It's so rude.
Thank you for your comments, Elizabeth. Moving on, is there anybody else that would like to speak to the council regarding the update?
Let's watch your language. I've asked all my students to watch the.
Is it against the law?
Meetings. So if we could watch our language, please. I don't mind you getting mad at us, but let's watch our language because we have young people here too.
Hello.
Steve, it is now your time to speak.
Thank you. Well, on that note, I have to say that, by the way, Steve Trujillo, District 7, hello, Ari Parker, our city council member. I haven't missed any city council meetings, and there's a reason for this. Elizabeth summarized it pretty well. I'm not going to use her language, and I'm not going to call Lowell Hurst a racist. He is not. But much of the frustration, about 90% of it, she's absolutely right. The reason why people are angry and upset is because, frankly, they see an awful lot of people, they see an awful lot of you patting each other on the back and basically giving short shrift to what Elizabeth's complaints are, and she's got some legitimate ones, and they get ignored. So I'm going to say a number of points that I want to get across. Number one, Matt, we should not at all be turning off water anytime now up until at least the 1st of January. To do so during heat spells particularly is unconscionable, and you know that. It is not okay. It's disgraceful. Number two, we have a lot of issues that don't get addressed by the city council. Many of them get basically lacquered over as if though they were covering up a piece of driftwood to make into a table, which is unfortunate because of the fact that this discourages people like Elizabeth, and she's upset. And frankly, she has a right to be upset. As I said, I'm not going to use her language, but of course, you need to realize that most of the people who watch these proceedings are old people like myself at 67. Elizabeth is a lot younger. And guess what, folks? She's the future of Watsonville, okay? And she needs to be encouraged rather than discouraged. And she's not the only one out there. She's just the one brave enough to contact you guys and try and shake up a little bit of the brain cells that are all in your heads that sometimes don't work all that well because they've been sitting for too long. Now, on another issue, which I'd like to bring up, it's very obvious to me that our farm worker population is not very well protected by either face coverings or enough water. It doesn't look real good when they're riding along in the bus and there's not a single mask on any of them, or very few. And you're wondering, why is this? Because that's a little petri dish in a bus that could easily become a COVID outbreak. And if there's one thing we don't want, it's another COVID outbreak. What are we doing to get the agribusiness firms to follow the law? And I'd love to know, how are we protecting them? Because they're a major part of our community. And with that, I will cease talking. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments, Steve. Moving on, is there anybody else that would like to address the council on the update?
Yeah, there is one more person that I see. I will allow them to speak in just a moment. Kathy, it's now your turn to address the council.
Okay, how's it? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, good. Sorry. I thank you very much, Matt, for addressing the utilities issue in your report. That is a concern of mine only because there are many people that have service that have over $1,000 balance back due. And I appreciate Steve Palmisano because he sent me an update and how the situation, the system works with regard to utilities. So the only question I have is there a way that the city can contact the property owner and or property manager as soon as possible so they could know about the back balances and maybe help these tenants with getting these balances up to date? And the other is, our particular office puts utilities in our name in between tenants. So when a tenant moves out, we put it in our name so that the utility doesn't get stopped. Is that the same as the property owner opening up an account? Because if it is, then that means that we would have to pay the tenant's back balance in order to put the utilities in our name. So I just wanted to get a clarification on that.
Those questions will be given to you offline and not at this point, but you can continue.
Okay, and that's basically it. Thank you very much, everybody. I know you're working hard, many hours, and I appreciate you keeping an open mind and keeping everything transparent for the citizens of Watsonville. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the council on the update?
Mayor, I don't see any other hands that are raised at this moment.
Okay, if there's nobody else, we'll move on now to the consent agenda. If there's no item to be pulled from the agenda at this time, I will entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to pull something from the consent agenda. I think it's F.
Go ahead.
I'd like to pull F from the consent agenda at this time.
Okay, we will then list it as the first item after approval. Thank you. Now I'll entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda. Nobody wants to?
I'll make a motion to accept the consent agenda except for the pulled item F.
Okay, is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Aurelio. Discussion on the consent agenda. Yes, I'd like to ask a question on D, and I don't know if it's Steve or Maria Esther that would respond. My question is, you state there are several businesses that will take advantage of the 20-minute parking place. Which business actually made the request to have 20 minutes? Steve or Maria Esther?
Good afternoon. I see you can hear me. This is Maria Esther Rodriguez, your city engineer. The request actually came from the business Togos and the apartment complex at 433 Main Street. And so noted, when we looked out in that area, we also saw the video store nearby, and then just adjacent businesses that somebody wants to pop in and pick up something quick to eat, or at a business nearby, they can do so in a 20-minute spot.
Well, I'm wanting to know how many businesses actually will benefit. Is it just basically Togos that will benefit versus others that are saying, yes, I would like this to happen because it would benefit me too?
Not that I've heard of specifically, no. But again, I know the video store in front and other businesses around. And these are new spots. We're not converting any current 1-hour spots. They're 2 new spots that we are able to accommodate that fit right in that area.
Okay, Aurelio?
Yeah, I have a concern now since Maria Esther mentioned that the apartment complex is also requesting these parking spots. I mean, Bill Hanson owns that whole big parking lot at the back for those apartment complexes. This is kind of bothersome now because I thought actually it was just going to be specifically for maybe Subway or the retailers in the bottom and not be able to use by the apartment.
Well,
residents. I mean, I mean, we have a property owner here that owns a massive parking lot and developed this project to begin with. And you know, I know he tows people in less than 20 minutes, but his residents should have some sort of permit to be allowed to park in their parking lot and walk into their building and walk out. I mean, you know, that's a problem.
I do want to add that these 2 parking spots on Main Street is public parking. So anybody that can park legally there for 20 minutes. It's not specific to any one business. It's for anybody in the downtown area that can benefit from a 20-minute space. And again, it is directly adjacent to Togo's. It's directly adjacent to the video store. And there's places right across the street that you can go in and perhaps get some food or pick up something at one of the stores across the street. So it is public spaces, not specific to any business, but for the benefit of anybody that can use a quick trip in, like the Togo's, like the video store and things like that.
In terms of, you keep talking about across the street, but across the street, there's actually public parking that is there all the time.
Correct, and those are all 1-hour spaces. So this, again, we're accommodating, these are 2 brand new, it's 2 brand new spaces. So we're not taking away, we're actually adding 2 more spaces in our downtown area that can, for 20 minutes. Every other spot in the downtown on Long Main Street is a 1-hour space. So these will be more high turnover spots that can be used easily.
Okay, is there any further discussion on any of the items for the consent agenda? Yes, Aurelio?
I wanted to address back again to this parking. I mean, we're gonna make this, or the 20-minute parking, as it is, people park there and we can't enforce it. How are we gonna enforce a 20-minute parking when they stay longer than the 20 minutes?
Actually, we do I think, a pretty good job of doing timed enforcement in our downtown area. We have our parking enforcement officers that go regularly around, and actually, in the past, I've heard some comments that he's almost too good when they go around and check the time limits in the downtown area. But it is enforceable, definitely. And should council approve this request would then go to Caltrans to make the final determination on if this could happen.
Okay, I think I hear a kitty.
Yes, I'm sorry, she just walked in.
Are there any other comments or questions on any of the items on the consent agenda?
Mayor, I just wanted to add to this really quickly that it's my understanding from the business owner at Togo's, who's made a large investment in a new business that is not going through the easiest of times, that the access from the back parking lot's very difficult because it requires that folks walk all the way around the building, around the block. And they often have folks picking up large catering orders and needing to pop in for 20 minutes. So we thought the request for 2 additional spaces that is adding parking on Main Street open to any public member was not an unreasonable request and would help one of our new businesses downtown.
Okay, thank you. Hearing no further comments or questions, I'll ask for a roll call.
Councilman Gomez?
I'm sorry, public input?
Oh, I forgot. Thank you for doing that. Yes, this is time. Oh God, I can't believe I didn't do that at the very beginning. Is there any public input to the consent agenda?
Greg, this is your time to speak.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so I'm the member that submitted the request from Togo's for these 20-minute spots. And I think it would benefit the downtown area like we do frequently get people driving through looking to pick up a quick lunch, including people from the police department and fire department. And when school's in session, teachers, and there is other businesses in the area that would benefit. It wouldn't just benefit us, you know, the hardware stores. Right there, they do have some spots already, but the video store, the skate shop across the street, there's a couple little shops. It's like a vitamin store across the street. And right now, they're just red spots. And we have had people park there and they get tickets, and we've paid those tickets just because we want people to keep coming downtown. We don't want them to be discouraged from coming downtown. We think downtown's a beautiful area, and that's why we invested down here. You know, we continue to lose money, but we continue to invest our employees and in the area because we believe in the downtown area. I guess that's all I have to say. Thanks for considering it.
Thank you, Craig. Is there any other public input on the consent agenda?
Yes. Steve, go ahead, please.
Okay, folks, it's becoming almost a standard joke that Watsonville will do anything to build yet another crap food cafe drive-through. Togo's, on the other hand, is not such a place. They actually have nutritious food to eat, even vegetables. Can you imagine here in the produce capital of California, there's actually a couple of sandwich shops that serve real fresh vegetables instead of everything in deep fried crap? Well, you know what? We've made Fat Boy Burger and McDonald's and Burger King so happy. We mean we can't do the same thing to grant 2 20-minute spaces for Togo's? I think we can, and I think we need to, and not to mention the other stores in the video store. And the fact that Togo's is losing money, well, guess what? In most places, they make money. I think Matt, our city manager, needs to treat the entire staff to a Togo's luncheon and bring Greg or Craig and the staff some money. Let's make sure that these businesses are able to make some money and stay here. Because as I told you, Freedom Boulevard's a joke. It's a junk food joke. And frankly, the corner of Main and 129 is the same thing. Let us bring some variety and some food that's actually edible and healthy to the downtown. And on the other note that I wanted to address, remember, folks, this community is becoming more and more broad and diverse. And there are a lot of people that are moving here from other places, and they can see and can tell, make the differentiation as
Steve,
to what.
I'm going to interrupt you, Steve, because this is the time for just consent agenda items.
All right, well, then the consent agenda items I have with no complaint with the others, but I'm asking therefore, yes, let's approve the 2 20-minute spaces. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Are there any other community members that would like to speak on the consent?
Elizabeth, this is your turn to speak.
Hi, yes, I'm from District 7. At top of the agenda, we have opportunity through diversity, unity through cooperation, working with community to create positive impact through service with heart. Lowell, you presented none of those responding to my comments before, and I don't think it's fair that I don't get a chance to respond to that. So I wanted to do so quickly. Regarding the Togo's item, I would like to say that I don't think that you should give them the 2 spaces.
You will be cut off unless you are addressing consent agenda items. This
Yeah,
is
I said the Togo's, right? Did you hear
okay.
me?
It's about Togo's. Yes, go ahead. Okay, go ahead.
So, I mean, I was repeating what I saw on the agenda. That's why I was speaking on it.
Okay.
Literally at the top of every agenda, which is why I'm concerned with it. But anyway, Togo's, I don't think it has much to do with the parking spot. I think it has a lot to do with where it's at. Community didn't really support the terrace when it became a thing, and It kind of shows the community's not supporting Togos. If you guys want to put a parking spot there and see if that'll help. I see a shift in Watsonville trying to support local businesses and making the effort in that. So if you guys could support local businesses, not gentrifying businesses, local businesses. So no, I don't think that you should give the Togos their parking spots, but y'all give me absolutely no faith in listening to anything that we say. So who cares, right? Continue on.
Thank you for your comments, Elizabeth. Is there anybody else that would like to speak to the council on the consent agenda items?
I don't see any other hands raised at this time, so you can proceed.
Okay, so back to, we have a motion. Beatrice, do we have a motion on the floor?
Yes, by Parker and second by Gonzalez.
Thank you. Is there any further conversation on the motion? Hearing none, we will
I
then.
believe Paco is raising his hand, Mayor.
Oh, I didn't see him. Go ahead, Paco.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a question to either the city manager or to Maria Esther, but if there are other opportunities to identify sort of similar situations where we can create additional parking like we did for Togos, can we do that for other businesses if it's possible, or is it this is just like a one-time thing?
It's certainly something we would consider if any business requested it. This is a simple way that we could support our local businesses. In this case, it'll come at very little expense. It adds 2 parking spaces on Main Street, supporting many local businesses. And we're making similar efforts when it comes to the Parklet program of just helping many of our small businesses that are struggling under the circumstances to have more options to be able to expand their outdoor dining and their outdoor operations. So absolutely.
Okay. And I'm sorry, I don't get to see all the council members on my screen, so do interrupt me if somebody raises their hand and I don't acknowledge you or I don't see you. Are there any further comments on the motion on the floor? Seeing none, then I'll ask for a roll call now.
Kaufman Gomez,
Yes.
Estrada,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hurst,
Yes.
Parker,
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes. Okay, moving on now. New business. The 20.
Item D.
Oh.
Item F?
Oh, F. I forgot about F.
F.
F, yes. But this time, in terms of F, since you have it pulled out, Ari, what did you want to address?
I wanted to address the fact that I would like to replace Trina Kaufman Gomez as a member on the Henry J. Mello Performing Arts Center Joint Powers Authority, because she will be terming out and her term continues to May 14th, 2021. So I would like to substitute my name for Councilwoman Kaufman Gomez is here. And maybe Trina would like to speak to that if she's available.
Yes, I'm perfectly fine with doing so, as we're pretty much a stagnant process with regards to our relationship on the JPA with the Mello Center due to COVID. So any new activity that may transpire will be likely into the next year. And I can certainly get my cohort up to speed, up to this process that we are with the JPA that we've been working with.
So am I understanding that you're supporting her request?
I would certainly support having RA replace me, since it's really going to be going into a full year that I will no longer be on council.
Okay, so Ari, do you want to make a motion to that extent?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to substitute myself, Councilwoman Ari Parker, for Councilwoman Trina Kaufman Gomez as a member of the Henry J. Mello Performing Arts Center Board of Directors Joint Powers Authority on this resolution.
Is there a second to that motion? Aurelio seconds that motion. Is there any further discussion on this motion? Seeing none, then let's have roll call.
I think
hold on a second.
Lo wanted to step in.
Oh,
Well, thank you. You know, I have been involved in this ever since the Mello Center was built back in '94. I was mayor that year. And so it is close to my heart that we try and maximize our relationship with the school district for, you know, joint usage of the Mello. And I think, you know, we'll get there once we get past COVID, but it's going to take a little while. And, you know, there again, you know, it's a difficult circumstance because of the finances and the Pajaro Valley Performing Arts, the former Pajaro Valley Performing Arts Association. So I think it'll be great to have Ari on board, and I want to thank Trina for her extraordinary efforts. And maybe that's a pat on the back, but I think she deserves it because, you know, to work for the school district and to work with the school district, you know, those are sometimes some tough circumstances. And so let's move forward, and I'll support the motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to address the motion? Trina?
Yes, thank you very much, Lowell, for your kind words. I do appreciate it. I know that this has been a contentious issue for quite some time in terms of the relationship between the school district and the city for this particular center. And I think we've really made a lot of headway this last year or so, pre-COVID, to actually have a good plan that's worked together collectively and cooperatively. And I'm sure that Ari, having also the education component of schools and resources, will be able to help out that and facilitate it so that we can get the highest and best use of the resources that we've also been part of the investment in, and that it doesn't fall into the wayside in terms of what the city has the ability to still engage in with this awesome location that is a gem in this community. So thank you. And for that, I do support it as well.
Thank you, Trina. Any other further comments on this motion?
Lo has his hand up.
Just a quick point that the city did put $1,600,000 into that facility when it was built, and the whole idea of that was a joint usage and an opportunity for the public to be able to use the Mello Center on occasion as well. And so $1.6 million was a lot of change way back in the day after the earthquake.
Yes, it was. Okay, any other comments? Seeing none, then let's have roll call.
Paco had his hand up.
Paco.
You had a hand up?
Paco.
Yeah, I did, Mayor.
Mr. Estrada.
I'm sorry, I didn't see you. Go ahead, Paco.
It's okay. My question is just how did, it's about process. How did we typically appoint the person in the past? Did we do it like we're doing it right now in the council meeting, or?
My understanding is that the mayor gets to make the appointments. And so I was the one that made the recommendation based on the recommendation made to me by Nick from our Parks and Recs. And so that's how I made the recommendation to go ahead and have them reappointed.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate the clarification.
And just to add to that, the committee had been dormant for quite some time prior to this. And so Councilmember Kaufman Gomez and Beatrice were the first appointees in quite some time. So this is only the second time they've been reappointed in the recent history.
Okay. Is there anybody else that would like to, and I'm scrolling down to make sure I'm not missing anybody. Okay, let's have roll call now.
Kaufman Gomez.
Mayor, point of order, do we go to the public on this comment before we take the vote?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah. Why don't we do that? Thank you for pointing that out, Trina. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak on this issue of the Henry Mello Performing Arts appointments?
There are not hands up right now, Mayor, so.
Okay. Thank you, Trina, for pointing that out. Okay, now we'll have roll call.
Kaufman Gomez,
Yes.
Estrada,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hurst,
Yes.
Parker,
Did you say Parker? Yes.
Garcia.
Yes. Okay, motion passes. Moving on now to new business, and this is our year 2019, 2020, and 2020, 2021 update and appropriation of $951,479.16 to the Risk Management Fund. So in terms of what we're going to get is an update, but the action we have to take is a motion on the resolution for that appropriation of the 900,000. So with that,
Mayor?
we'll have a staff.
Mayor,
Oh, yes.
could I interrupt just a second to ask if any Spanish speakers are on the line, that they could raise their hand?
Would you say it in Spanish?
Yeah, I will. Queríamos saber si hay alguna persona que está escuchando la junta en español. Por favor, si oprimen el botón de español, no, si oprimen el botón de la manita para levantar la mano, para saber si alguien está escuchando esta junta en español. You can continue.
Okay. So with that, we'll have a staff report, and it doesn't say who, but I think it's Cindy.
Good evening, council members. Yes, I have kind of a lengthy staff report for you today. It's, as promised, sort of the quarterly updates. So just give me 1 second. I'll get my presentation up for you. Let's see, share screen. Can you all see my screen?
No.
No. Let's see. Now can you see my screen?
Yes.
All righty, here we go. So first of all, I just want to, again, so this is sort of, as I promised during our budget process, we would be doing quarterly updates. So this is the first one. So I want to just kind of take you back in time and remind everybody of where we were when we adopted the budget. So budget was presented to council on May 30th, and it was adopted then in your 2 meetings in June. And at that point, it was based primarily on data from the quarter that was ending March 30th. So if you can remember way back to then, the pandemic had really just started. And the economy and businesses and everything had really shut down. We really had no data on which to base the projections that we were making in the budget. It was a very quick turnaround from when the pandemic started and when we had to present and adopt a budget. So at that time, we assumed a $6.5 million revenue deficit at about 18% of our revenues. So to balance that budget, we made $4.3 million in expenditure reductions, and we used $2.2 million of our emergency reserves. So where we are now, we are working in a place where I have solid data through the end of June, through June 30th. And even though now it is September, you know, June might seem a little bit far away. So, you know, for example, at the end of June, I don't know where you all were, but we were sort of at this optimistic place where things were looking good, and we hadn't really had a surge in Santa Cruz County. At that point, I was actually thinking about enrolling my daughter into some summer camps that I wound up not doing because we had surges. So this data, again, it's back coming to us from a point where I think we're still somewhat optimistic before the summer shut down. So the months of July and August are not reflected yet in our data. I think it's just really important to remember the data that we're working with and how it's not necessarily in line with what we're experiencing now. You know, the other thing we didn't know at the end of June was that the schools were going to be closed through December. And now we know that. So you know, we do have some good news coming up in the news. You know, there's talk about a possible vaccine at the end of the year. Unemployment is still down. And so, and as Matt mentioned, we're in the red, but now we might go back to purple. I think when all this began and we adopted the budget, we had no idea it was going to be so lumpy. I think there was some expectation that it would tank and then we would come back up. So I just want to remind people of where we were at and what the data is that we were working with. So based on that, I'm going to jump into sort of my normal routine where I'm going to go through our major revenue sources, and then we can take questions at the end. So of course, our major revenue source of property tax, when we adopted the budget, we assumed it was going to be about a 3% reduction. At that time in April and May, I was making projections a lot of times based on the previous recession's data. This recession has proven to be different than the last recession, but at that point in time, we really didn't have anything else to go on. So at this point, we have not really seen the housing market impacted in nearly the same way as we did the last recession. So on the next few charts I'm going to show, they all have this very similar bar graph where I'm going to show you what we got in fiscal year 19, what we're projecting for the end of fiscal year 20, what our budget is, and then some different range of options for what I think the updated projections can be. So like I said, at the time of the budget, we were assuming a 3% reduction based on the prior year or prior recession experience. Thus far, we really haven't seen the housing market be impacted so much. January 2021 will close the rolls for this year, and that will impact our 2022. The other thing that happens with property taxes, there's definitely a lag in when the rolls close and the taxes get assessed and when they're actually due and remitted to us. So at this point, we are optimistic that the budget projection number is going to be on the low side, and we will have property tax coming in above what we budgeted. Sales tax, so same thing. So in sales tax right now, we actually got data today about what our remittances are through June 30th. That doesn't really hold the analysis yet. So this revenue stream has another sort of quarter delay on when we get information to analyze. So what we're basing this on right now is mostly through March data, though we have some amount of June data. And what it shows is that to end fiscal year 1920, we only saw about a 5.8% decline from the prior year. And that's much better than we were forecasting. We had been told to expect up to a 10% decline in this revenue category. In April through June, we're seeing that quarter is now about 16% below the prior year. Again, that's a huge drop, but it is not the 25% that actually we were projecting during the budget adoption. So I think there's a couple of reasons for this. I think I actually talked to our sales tax consultants just the other day, and they're seeing big swings happening all over the state, where some places are much worse off than they had expected and others are much better off. I think Watsonville is this interesting place where previously some of our money was spent elsewhere. You know, people left Watsonville for entertainment purposes and shopping purposes, and now they're not. So I think, you know, anecdotally, we're seeing that we are retaining maybe a greater proportion of our residents' expenditures. They may be having less expenditures overall, but they are probably spending more of that in Watsonville. So we're not seeing sort of the dramatic declines that we had anticipated a couple of months ago. The other thing that I want to talk about and mention is how the county pool trends are affecting our sales tax. If you recall, the county pool is online purchases. So all the online pool purchases for Santa Cruz County go into a big pool, and then they're divided up and allocated to all the different cities and the unincorporated Santa Cruz based on percentage of brick and mortar sales. So we're seeing sort of three different things at work with the county pools that are helping us out. So one, we're still seeing the benefit of the Wayfair decision, which started impacting our sales tax about a year ago. So we have seen a dramatic increase in just the size of the pool and the size of the pie that's getting divided, because there are a lot more types of online sales that are now being taxed, okay? So the second thing, of course, is with shelter in place, people are now buying more online as opposed to brick and mortar. So number two, increasing the size of that pie. And then the third advantage that Watsonville is seeing is that it seems that right now, our proportion of brick and mortar sales has not dropped as much as, say, Santa Cruz or Capitola or some of the other cities within Santa Cruz County. So our share of the pool is ticking up. So it's not dramatic, but by a couple of percentage points. And when we're talking about a tax base of over $2 million, that really starts adding up. So long story short, we are seeing sales tax at this point not as dramatically bad as we had anticipated a couple of months ago. But again, remember that this data, and I think it's really important to remember that this data is basically through June 30th, and that is before the enhanced unemployment benefits ended. So that extra $600 that people were getting in their paychecks, that ended on July 31st. So this data doesn't yet reflect what households and what decisions households had to make based on that unemployment check going back to a smaller size. And then again, perhaps decisions that households had to make in terms of their own employment and to deal with their children being at home. So this is, again, it's a couple of months behind, but given what we have seen in the few months of the recessionary data that we have, it doesn't look as bad as we thought. So this is just showing sort of the different categories of sales tax that we get. So this is sort of really highlighting, you can see that dramatic increase in that sort of tealish green bar, that's the state and county pool. So you can see that that was dramatically increasing even before the recession hit. And like I said, I think that's mostly having to do with sort of that Wayfair decision. And then this is really only through Q1. As I said, we haven't gotten the analysis on this yet, but so Q1 is only 1 month of decline in sales, but you can see every other category starting to sort of tick down. This will get updated, gosh, probably within a couple of weeks here. And I'm not doing another full update to you until December, but I'd be happy to share out some additional sales tax analysis as soon as we have it, to not have to wait so long. Our other big revenue, it's about 10% of our general fund, is utility users tax. Again, we sort of made assumptions in March based on what had happened during the prior recession, where we saw about an 8% decline, and so that is what we budgeted. Thus far, again, that doesn't seem to be holding true. It could be, again, that, you know, telecommunications are just much more essential and a much firmer part of our lives than they were during the last recession, you know, more than 10 years ago. I don't know if anybody can live without their phones these days. The other thing is that, of course, telecommunications and internet services and all that are so much more important now with online education, and frankly, with people being kind of stuck at home and not having a lot of other entertainment. So again, this is another area where we're just not seeing the dramatic declines that we had anticipated. And then the next area is hotel tax. Hotel tax is really not, I think I've mentioned several times before, it's not a huge part of our revenue, but I do think it's indicative of the economy and what's going on in Watsonville. So this tax is remitted a quarter behind. So we are actually just now starting to receive payments from the quarter ending June 30th. So that's not really reflected in the collections data yet, but I looked through them kind of physically the other day, and we are seeing that the remittances are coming in at about 50% below. That's better than what we had thought. I had assumed actually that in the first quarter they would drop by about 75%, and then maybe by the end of the year get up to about a 25% decline. So we're already at only 50%. you know, that's not good, but it's again better than what we had thought. So I think this is an area where I think we will still stay pretty low. This is probably going to be one of the areas most impacted for the longest term, as I think people will be nervous to get back to traveling, but probably not as bad as we were thinking. So, and the other good news on this, I think in discussions with the Hampton Inn that's being built off of Highway 1, I know that they're actually on track, I believe, to be opening up possibly by the end of the calendar year or into the beginning of the next year. So there's a possibility we'll see about a quarter's worth of tax remittances from that new hotel opening. So the other sort of moving piece to our revenue story is that literally like the day the budget was adopted, we received word that the state had included in their budget an allocation of CARES money to cities and counties. So Watsonville is going to receive $636,000 of CARES money passed through us from the state. We are a subrecipient of that federal money. It's important to note that this is an allocation. This is not a reimbursement. So they are pretty much just giving us this money, and then we have to submit reports justifying that submission with qualifying expenditures by meeting certain deadlines. We are justifying that money for the most part with public safety expenses. The Department of Finance has issued instructions that say that for administrative convenience, public safety can be presumed to be substantially dedicated to mitigating COVID. So the categories for the CARES funding are very restricted. You have to follow certain purchasing guidelines and certain salaries and benefits guidelines and stuff. And so for administrative convenience, they're allowing us to report our public safety expenditures. So that's how we will be reporting this. But it doesn't change the fact that it just means we're going to be getting and being able to justify our receipt of $636,000. FEMA money, on the other hand, is a reimbursement where we submit claims to them based on our expenditures. So we will do this for both the fires and for COVID. They will reimburse us 75%, but they are very, very limited and restrictive in what they're willing to reimburse. So I believe that I actually only expected to get maybe $50,000 to $100,000 out of our claims to FEMA for COVID. Okay. So then overall, just kind of in summary, I know it sounds sort of very optimistic, but I do want to point out, you know, this is sort of a history of our revenue for the last 5 years. So even though at this point it does not look like it will be as bad as we projected in budget, even at sort of my most optimistic numbers right now, we're still definitely in a recessionary scenario, and it would definitely be the worst year in probably at least 3 years. So, you know, like I said, at this point, we're sort of optimistic about where we're going revenue-wise compared to the budget. But again, this is all considering, you know, again, it's data as of June, it's data before the swings, it's data before unemployment ended. So it's hard to feel totally confident. It's hard to feel 100% confident at this point, which is part of why I added in this kind of range looking a couple of different scenarios for each of the major revenue streams. Okay, I'm going to jump to expenditures. The expenditure side of this is a little bit less juicy because it's way too early to tell. So in expenditures for last fiscal year, when I came to you in April and I gave you some sort of projections for the end of the year, I said that we would end the year with a couple $100,000 in savings. And we're still at that point, but what has happened is, if you remember when COVID hit in March, we froze a lot of our expenditures. We froze our hiring. We didn't allow departments to continue hiring. The Parks Department essentially had to shut down their operations. So there were savings within departments, but a lot of that savings then got redirected to our COVID efforts. So in fiscal year 1920 alone on the general fund, we spent about $1 million on unanticipated COVID response items. Part of this was salaries the first week when we sort of shut down and we didn't actually know how our employees continue working. And then since then, it's been salaries of people that have directed their time towards COVID response. Again, this wasn't unbudgeted in the sense that it's salaries and salaries were budgeted, but it just sort of show, I think, demonstrate kind of the amount of operational shift that has had to happen within departments. A portion of this then, of course, has also been purchasing additional PPE, additional cleaning supplies, different software packages to make telecommuting more possible, to make these meetings happen. So there's also been some amount of materials and supplies purchases that hadn't been anticipated. So all the budget savings from departments being frozen essentially as of March has been kind of eaten up by our response. In 2021, as I said, this is really expenditure data is only through kind of the end of July 1st at this point. So it's really too early to make any sort of assumptions about expenditures within the current budget year. Though there are some areas really of developing pressure points, I would say. So the Community Development Department, I think if you remember during the budget process, they did have a month of revenue in April where their activity dropped by 75%. And so we did wind up reducing their budget pretty significantly. And it actually, Susie's department has been pretty busy over the summer. So they are operating maybe closer to about 15% below normal, and not 75 or 50 or even greater as we had sort of assumed. So, so right now they're working within the budget that they have, but I do think it's an area that if the activity level keeps up, they're going to be under pressure. Their budget is going to feel very tight to them. So the other areas, of course, the COVID and the fire response, we're continuing to eat within our budget expenses for COVID and now the fire response that hadn't been anticipated. So it is an area where we're just feeling pressure. We're not going to, we cut so much out of our budget last year that there's just not a lot of flexibility. Anywhere a department is feeling squeezed, they're going to wind up going over and we might have to make adjustments. The rental assistance program that you have on a later agenda item has been sort of an area of community need that's really been important to the council and it's been apparent to city staff. Fire overtime right now is tracking, the fire department is tracking to be probably several $100,000 over budget on overtime, but that is because they have essentially had strike teams on response to various fires since the beginning of the fiscal year. So at this point, they are likely to have revenue reimbursements for that entire time, but if we don't fix their budget, they will look like they're very much over budget again, but that is for mutual aid response and they will be reimbursed for that. The other emerging pressures are salary negotiations. We are now out of contract with 2 of our bargaining groups. Their contracts expired at the end of the last fiscal year on June 30th, and we asked them to put off negotiations until we had more information. So they have been out of contract now for several months. Our SEIU contract expires in December, at the end of December. And if you recall, the budget assumes no increases for either of those bargaining groups at this point, but we will have to negotiate. And then finally, actually kind of an area of good news is CalPERS. So CalPERS will not affect us this year's budget, but we did hear from CalPERS that they ended their fiscal year with returns of about 4.6%. Normally they assume 7% returns. So 4.6 is of course less than what they assume. but it's not the 0 that they were telling us at the end of March. So they too, it's going to be, it does mean that in 2 years from now, our CalPERS costs will increase more than we had sort of expected, but not quite as much as we thought they were in March. So that's just an area of good news for now. Let's see. I just lost my place. There we go. Okay. So now just going away from the general fund a little bit, just jumping briefly to some of the other funds. Matt talked a little bit about the utilities during his update. So, you know, again, thus far, collections and receipts from them have been fairly normal. As Matt mentioned, we do have customers that are falling farther behind. You know, the utilities also, they did wind up delaying a rate increase by 1 year. And had we put that rate increase that they were proposing into effect, it would have been worth about $2 million. So it is about $2 million that, because of compounding effects of what would have been the increases, will affect the utilities going forward. As I've mentioned many times, they, over the last few years, have built up some pretty strong cash balances that they are able to rely on for the moment. And they're continuing to flex their capital plan and looking for low interest funding alternatives to some of their capital so that they can continue to sort of survive on without rate increases. They are talking about opening back up to the public later this month. They haven't been open for a while. And we're hoping that that, along with some reaching out to those customers that are delayed, will help eat away at those customers that are falling farther and farther behind. So the other funds I'm bringing up here are our other funds, our other sort of major funds that are in some ways sales revenue based. I don't want to say exactly sales tax, because some of these it's sales tax that's then passed through various formulas and such. But in some ways, all of these funds are funded by sales. So all of these funds will be affected positively by the more optimistic sales tax numbers that I was talking about earlier. All of these funds also in our budget also had pretty healthy cash balances. We're very lucky that we started this year in a place with sort of strong reserves in all of our funds. And what I suspect that we will do this year is actually perhaps not make a lot of expenditure adjustments to these funds and simply just allow them to replenish their reserves and not draw down quite as far on their balances as we had originally expected. So that's really good news for all of these funds. But again, it's really kind of too early to make any sort of final conclusions about them. But right now we're sort of optimistic. So the one appropriation item that you have on your agenda today is to approve a resolution for our risk management fund. Our risk management fund is an internal service fund of the city. It's funded by all funds, and it sort of, you know, it works just as an insurance fund would, where we have paid a retainer for a specific case. And now that case is being settled with a payment of $951,000. We don't have budget authority to make that kind of a payment, but because of our participation in PARSEC, we will make that payment and then be reimbursed. So it's a cost neutral resolution to the city because we will, like I said, we will make the payment, but then we will be fully reimbursed. So your resolution will have both the revenue and the expenditure side of this equation. So in terms of next steps, so on December 8th, at your December 8th meeting, I will be bringing another update, and that will have data ending the quarter that we're currently in. So that will be data from July through the end of September. I think at that point, we're likely to also include an appropriations package, one to address some of the pressure areas that we're seeing, but also to look to perhaps replenishing our emergency reserve, restoring some of the employee compensation, and then again, reinvesting in programs and services where we're really seeing pressure based on the sort of the severe expenditure reductions we had made. Not really willing to do that yet until we have at least another quarter of data. So that's why we're going to wait until December 8th. And then in February, I'll come back to you with your mid-year report, which will include data through the end of December. That will also include the final CAFR. And at that point, I will also be updating the 5-year financial plan. So I'll roll all of these projections into the next couple of years. And that will be officially sort of kicking off our budget season. So the next budget cycle then, of course, is actually our 2-year budget cycle. So we'll need to be balancing 2 fiscal years. Lots of moving parts. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, so this is time for City Council clarification and technical questions, and we will do the rotating. Paco, you go first.
Thank you, Mayor, and Cindy, thank you very much for the update. A lot of good, but you know, we're still not out of the woods. I remember that in was it prior to the end of the last fiscal year, we had approved funding to increase internet access throughout the city, and you were mentioning about the Wayfair decision and people's sort of need to reliance on Wi-Fi and internet, and you know, thinking back at that picture with the youth who were at Taco Bell, it just sort of seems like the need for Wi-Fi is just something that's not going to go away after the pandemic. And is there more that we can do to sort of bring the internet to everyone in sort of a more equal and equitable way? I know that we have concerns about cell towers and their safety, but is there more that we can do to make sure that everyone has access to the internet right now?
I see Matt jumped in.
I'm going to help Cindy with this question. So yes, there's been a lot of conversations happening regionally. As a matter of fact, I was on a call last week with Monterey Bay Economic Partnership, and they're bringing together ISPs, including Cruise.io, to really expand access. The hotspots have been kind of a great stopgap that a lot of school districts have been using over the pandemic, but it's really not sustainable long term. And so we have had Charter and Cruise.io and others actually reach out wanting to expand partnerships for expanding infrastructure access and expanding fiber as well. So that's something we're going to be looking at. We also think it might be a qualifying investment under some of the COVID funding that has come in, and that could be coming in down the road as well. So yes, it's still very much top of mind. We know that there's still an unmet need there in the community. Many of you probably saw the news article a couple of weeks ago with a couple children trying to gain access to internet through a fast food restaurant. So it is certainly a priority, and we're going to continue looking at those opportunities with our local partners. We're also blessed to have some great ISPs like Cruise.io that are very community minded. And want to partner on those efforts. So more to come.
Yeah, and I just see Carlos's name popping up, but I also believe, Carlos, correct me if I'm wrong, that there was some amount of, I believe, CDBG money that we've already actually allocated to that through earlier in the year.
Yes, good evening, Mayor, Council. That is correct. So through the CDBG program, we allocated $25,000 to help with mobile hotspots.
Great. I appreciate the information. I do remember that we had allocated that funding, but now I'm thinking that maybe, you know, a bigger investment for sure, not either in infrastructure or more partnerships at a regional level, I think would just really, you know, I'm just sort of shocked that, but it makes total sense that online shopping has really picked up and been sort of a saving grace a little bit for the community. And we really want to make sure that are many of our businesses taking advantage as well? I know there's a lot of businesses that are doing like deliveries, right? Do they need to get a permit, or are they just doing it on their own?
To do deliveries, I don't think they need a permit. Matt will jump on that, but I'll just say from sales tax data, restaurants and hotels, again, that was an area where we really expected it to plummet. And data that we literally got this morning showed that that category was only down, actually, I think about 15 or 16%. So I was actually really shocked. I had expected it to drop a lot further. But again, I think that's sort of the dynamic where maybe perhaps Watsonville people used to go out to dinner in Santa Cruz and now are buying their takeout from local restaurants. I'll let Matt speak to permitting issues.
Yeah, I think everything Cindy raised is correct. There's no special or additional permit required for a business to shift or expand their online sales. And I know a lot of our local businesses have done that over the last few months. It's kind of a stiff learning curve early on, but we now have more and more businesses that are and restaurants that are easier to access online. It was really incredible, almost unprecedented to see a 50% spike in online sales second quarter over second quarter compared to last year. We've never seen an increase at that rapid of a rate. And obviously under these circumstances, with folks sheltering in place, looking back on it, you can understand, where that influx came. But our sales tax consultants were originally projecting about a 20%. And it has far exceeded those numbers and really helped to offset some of the losses we've seen in some of the other economic sectors.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just going to make 2 questions for now, and I want to allow my colleagues to make questions. And if I have more, maybe after the motion,
We'll come back
I'll
to
ask.
you. Okay. Yeah. Moving on to Lowell.
Thank you, Mayor. Can you hear me okay? Yes?
Yes.
Yeah, good. At the risk of patting staff on the back, and sometimes we can do that, and sometimes they don't really deserve it. But in this case, I think all the department heads have sacrificed, and the employees have sacrificed in the past, and we've built up some good reserves. I remember when we didn't have any money, and it was very difficult, and we're on the cusp now. This is not necessarily a good news budget, but it's not a bad news budget either. And so hopefully we can get through this. And I'm wondering, what we can do to promote more people to shop locally, and what can we do to encourage people to improve their property, and that helps raise the tax base. And what can we do to help people to pay their bills and pay their taxes as well? What can we do?
Hard question to answer.
I think a lot of that work is continuing to do what we're doing now. As I mentioned earlier, we're providing a lot of support to our local businesses. This has not been an easy time for businesses or families under the circumstance. Cautiously optimistic, but certainly not out of the woods. And as Cindy mentioned, I think the economy was really supported by that extra $600 a week supplemental unemployment benefits that many families were receiving. Nationwide, they saw that consumer spending was at about 94% of pre-pandemic levels with all the other challenges we had. So those stimulus packages certainly had an impact. And now that many of those provisions have expired, we need to take a hard look at what happens over the next few months before we start bringing budget reappropriations to the council. So we're monitoring that closely.
Okay, moving on to Aurelio.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I want to go just back a little bit. Great presentation, thank you. And in regards to patting folks on the back, I think we pat our whole community on their back for their great efforts overall. This is from our activists to our farm workers, to our teachers, and everybody in between. I think that's what, when we're thanking everybody, we thank our whole community. But going back to your presentation, and thank you for a good presentation, to the $636,000 from the CARES Act that we're going to be putting into the public safety financing, I guess, and we're going to be able to pull some of that and put it into our general fund, right? This is just for reporting purposes. It's not going to be stuck in public safety. I just want to try to make that clear to the public, because the public may see that we're putting it into public safety, which some may see fire and police. And again, you know, misperception there. But that will allow us to release some of our general funds and to be able to allocate that money then where we need it within our community. Is that correct?
Absolutely. So the money is actually not going into the police or safety departments, right? It is actually going into the general fund. And I'm simply, as the Department of Finance is their own language, I'm using an administrative convenience to report public safety expenditures to justify receipt of that money. But that money then is going into our overall general fund. And as you've seen through the presentation, it's going to help relieve some of our pressure on our general fund so that then we can use our general fund for whatever priorities the council and the community has.
And this is, I think, more of a comment than a question. One of the reasons I think that our spending here locally has maintained its level is because we do have a lot of farm workers that live within our city, and they are still working. And so they are still receiving a paycheck. Most of them aren't receiving that $600 paycheck that some of our hospitality folks may be receiving. So we need to understand that the city of Watsonville really is diverse, and we're lucky for that. And so I think that's going to carry us. This is something that I've mentioned to our city manager, that it's one of our strong points that we have as a community, is our ag industry. And you know, we do need to work on making more diverse, but I'm hoping that as a city, we continue to support our local commerce, our local businesses. You indicated that we had an increase of, I think, 2% of spending locally, and about, you know, from the normal average. And I'm hopefully that we can carry that forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Aurelio. Moving on to Felipe.
Yes, going back to what Lowell asked, you know, one thing is for sure is, you know, people need to shop local. You know, we just got a TV and a sound bar here from Target right now. They're installing back in the back, the man cave back in the back now. So shop local, that's one thing you could do. I had a couple of questions. I wanted to find out if TOT applies to some of the, you know, the agricultural workers, the H-2A workers that big agricultural companies bring in. Does TOT apply to them, to these big ag companies? And also, does the emergency housing that they bring into the hotels, does TOT apply to that as well?
I think the short answer is, and Cindy may have more information on it, I believe the way our TOT ordinance is written is that for short-term stays, which is defined as anything less than 30 days, they are paying TOT. For hotel residencies that exceed that period of time, the TOT tax does not apply, but only certain hotels qualify for those longer-term stays. Not all of our hotels and motels do. And so for many of those individuals that are renting out hotels right now for COVID-related response or for isolation housing, when they fall within that, I believe that it still falls subject to the TOT. But I'm not sure if Cindy has anything she wants to add.
No, I think you're right. Honestly, I don't know. We haven't actually gotten any requests to waive TOT for, you know, for example, the spots that are being rented out, for example, by the county for quarantining purposes, or any of those things. We'll see when they get remitted, honestly. I can find out more, but we haven't gotten requests to waive TOT for those rooms.
I think if it's OES money or CARES money, I don't think we probably should either. But my other question is there an opportunity to use the CARES Act money for some of the Wi-Fi efforts?
It is a qualifying expense. I think, and you know, I've said this to Matt and to the executive team many, many times. I think one of the things we have to think about CARES money is not think about what's qualifying and can we use it for this? Like at this point, it's just part of our general fund bucket. So it depends on what priorities you have for the general fund. But it certainly is a qualifying expense, and it's an expense that if it is a council priority, we could look at.
And how would do you think the FEMA money would qualify for Wi-Fi and sort of during this pandemic that we have to have, you know, telecommunications?
The FEMA money will not help us provide Wi-Fi for the school districts because we are not the responsible entity. So if the school district wanted to apply for that, I think that would be between the school district and FEMA. But because we are not the entity responsible for educating children, it would not be a qualifying expenditure for us.
The other thing I wanted to add is, and I mentioned this earlier, the county also received $27 million in direct CARES funding to help with their response. As part of their expenditure allocation plan, they included funding for business grant support programs, which are available to businesses in unincorporated and parts of the city. It included a grant line item to also support community organizations that are helping with COVID-related support efforts. However, we noticed, and one of the reasons why you have an emergency housing assistance plan in front of you tonight with $100,000 allocation is that their rental assistance program did not include individuals that were outside of the unincorporated area. So it would not have been accessible for Watsonville residents, for example. So with the CARES offset that Cindy was describing, it gave us the ability to now bring a recommendation to the council of refunding the rental assistance program with $100,000 of funding that was freed up in the general fund to meet a gap that wasn't being met with some of the regional programs that are being put in place. And we'll continue doing that. So when we come back in December, if we're identifying other needs that are not being met through community partnership and through county funding programs, this will provide an opportunity for us to come back to the council and make further recommendations down the road.
Thank you, Felipe. Moving on to Ari.
Yeah, thank you, Felipe, because that was something that was on my mind too. So thank you, Councilman Hernandez, for bringing that up. So it's a pat on the back again. Kudos, Cindy, for this creativity, because I see this as you're looking, as Councilman Gonzalez said, you know, it looks like we're doing public safety because that's the broader category that we can do. But what we're really doing in the end is helping out renters, and kudos for that flow chart, how you got there and utilize this money. How much, again, are we using from our reserves in this?
We had budgeted to spend about 2.2 million.
Okay. And we had budgeted to spend 2.2 million. And what, and is that what we are actually going to do at this point?
I actually don't believe so. I think we will end fiscal year 1920 with a little bit more positive than we expected. And so it will depend on if the council wants to, for example, use some of that money to replenish the reserve, or even for this year's good news, it would depend on how much of the good news you would want to spend versus how much you would want to replenish the reserve. So if you wanted to spend it all, then we would still be using that $2.2 million, but that will not be my recommendation to you. But again, I think in December, when we have another solid quarter of financial information, is when we'll start. I will present you sort of with more information and options around that.
Okay, and in saying that, and I'm sure that's why you wouldn't. The next couple of years look even more difficult in projections than what this year is, right?
Yes. So the part of that is, you know, sort of historically, Watsonville has also taken longer to come out of slumps and recessions than other places. So again, it's all very incredibly fluid at this point, but we do know that there are rising economic pressures, particularly with CalPERS. And so the 5-year outlook still doesn't look very good. And so we may want to hold on to some of our reserves to help stretch it out over some rough period ahead.
So other than the community programs that we have talked about and we have funded to support the people who live here who are struggling, it's probably wise to be conservative with any positive funding at this point.
I'm always conservative. But yes, again, you know, especially like I said, at this point, the data is coming to us from before, when the unemployment, enhanced unemployment, the extra $600 ended. So for me to be very comfortable with making some recommendations to you, I want one more quarter that includes that, so we can really see what the recession looks like. This has been a very different recession because we actually have seen a huge amount of federal support than we had in the last one. But as Matt mentioned, that's now ending. And so I think it's really important for us to see the impacts of that before we make too many decisions.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much for your efforts on this, Cindy. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ari. Moving on to Trina.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a few questions. Again, in the same pathway of the $2.2 million, how much actually have we spent versus being able to get some of the 636,000 used for it instead? Because obviously, if we don't need to spend it, we shouldn't. We should make sure that we keep it in the long stretch.
Well, we haven't actually really spent any of it yet, because what will happen is sort of that at the end of the year, whatever the level of expenditures exceed our revenues, it was what will eat into our reserves. So for you to actually, so we would need to overspend our expenditures to reduce that. So we actually really haven't spent any of it yet.
Okay, so it's there at the end to go ahead and draw from, even though we've allocated it to be set aside in the event it's needed then.
Yes.
Well, you talked about the fire department and that we're going to be several $100,000 over. When will we see those figures, and what happens in terms of the reimbursement, so that we can make sure that we get whole for the services that our local firefighters have contributed to for this crisis, the FEMA disaster?
Right. So, you know, in past years, the fire department actually goes over budget most years, but they do wind up getting reimbursements, and our expenditure authority elsewhere in the city has always been flexible enough to cover their overage. Because we cut so much this year, I don't think that's going to happen. But the reimbursement process for them is actually pretty quick and pretty efficient, because they're very experienced at this. So when they go out on strike teams, when the incidents are done, they put together, they're reporting it, they report it to the agency that they're responding to, and we usually get a turnout around within a couple of months. I've been working very closely with the fire department to monitor this. At this point, they're going to be filing for at least $140,000 of reimbursement, which will cover the overage in overtime that they've had thus far this fiscal year. So right now they're at a point where what we will expect in reimbursements and what we'll frankly be able to book as receivables is going to cover what they're going over.
Okay, because I know that we always have overage there, so I just wanted to see how we're making sure we're getting it reimbursed back to us because of our budget and whatnot. Can you at some point also give us the per capita spending, and you know how that's changed over the course? Because as we gain more of the nonprofits with no tax revenue off of the properties, and our population is increasing, we get a tighter and tighter margin of what our general fund has available to us for our resources. So that puts us at a higher immediate susceptibility when it comes to budget cuts and anything that happens with our economy. For any kind of little blip in the system, it affects us tremendously, really quick. Can you give us maybe a historical on that at some point so that we can actually see how that's changed over maybe the last decade or so, whatever historical value we can get at that? Because as we gain more of these housing projects that don't have it, and we're still having to squeeze the per capita smaller and smaller, it creates that ripple and impact on us as a community for these budgets a lot faster. So that would be helpful. Can you talk a little bit about the furlough impact as a result of your expectations versus the projections versus what we've actually been seeing? How will that affect our furloughs?
Well, right now, the bargaining units that agreed to furloughs, they've been in place. So right now they've already had three furlough days, and they have 3 left on the books. So all told, the groups that gave up their salary based on either furloughs or diseases, it was worth about $280,000, if you recall, in terms of budget savings. All those bargaining groups have side letters with the city. So unless we take action to change those side letters, those furloughs and delayed salary increases will continue until the end of December, at which point they would go back on their normal schedule.
Okay. And the utilities, do we have the ability to use a 637 that's received to help offset the $500,000 that we're seeing on the shortage of our utility collection? Because we have a $500,000 worth of utility bills, which is a little bit more of a spike than what we're, in terms of what our baseline is after. Can we be able to use that or have some of it used to set aside in case there are members of the public that could use that as a grant to help pay or offset some of the cost of the utilities, since the bills are going to continue and we're not shutting off the utility?
So guidance on that has actually been mixed and leaning towards no, because the CARES funding very specifically says you cannot use it to offset revenue losses. And since that would be a revenue loss for the city, the guidance is kind of leaning towards no. We could use general fund money to support our payment of utility bills if that is what the council chose to do. Yeah, that's just kind of under Prop 218 guidelines. That's kind of the only money we can use is general fund.
Okay. I just want to make sure that we're cautiously watching that, because obviously we need it for the services, but at the impact that it could have as it goes on if we don't have a policy in place of informing the property owners, and while the tenant situation is going on, we just need to make sure that we have the communication open there. And then the other thing about your TOT, Matt and I talked about getting Maggie involved and getting some more of the TOT information. The transient occupancy tax, which to the public, that's what TOT means. Some of our abbreviations the public doesn't necessarily know, so it's good to at least give them a little bit of the heads up first. So the transient occupancy tax pays for Maggie Ivy, and at some point, Matt and I have discussed bringing her back, because obviously tourism has had a big impact, which has then been a fiscal impact on us, and we just want to make sure that she tells us how much money is coming in and what they've done about the money. She should also tell us how little is coming in and how she's having to ratchet back on how to spend the money, that it goes to her organization that is raised on the TOT money that is collected in this community. So I just want to make sure that we have that brought into the conversation. What kind of impact have we had on productivity with the furloughs and the work from home? Is there anything fiscally that we can account for on, you know, how long it takes for somebody to call in and get something with the city versus getting, you know, the closure that's going on there. Because I know that in other resources, it's taking us a lot longer to get the response, which then makes it even longer on projects to either get started or to get the help from some of the city resources. Can we talk a little bit about what impact that's had with our budget as well, with how many are working in the office, how many are working from home? What do we know about the productivity? Can we talk a little bit about in any way on that one?
I can speak to that. So I would say early on, it was a stiff learning curve because we had to rapidly accelerate from being an organization that had very little telecommuting to overnight going to about 50% of our employees working from home. Over the last few months, the number of on-site employees quickly grew. I would say it's closer now to about 80% of our employees are on-site every day. Because we're a full service city. And so we can't run a wastewater treatment plant or an airport or a police department remotely. So I think overall, from an operational efficiency standpoint, I think we are operating at full tilt at this point through significant effort and a big thanks to our IT department who quickly jumped into action to make that possible. So I'm very comfortable with our level of operations as they stand today, and we're going to have to monitor that as we go into the fall and winter. And of course, distance learning has placed a great burden on our working parents that are part of part of our city team. So there's a lot to factor, but I think it's in a good place at this point.
Okay, and I just think that. It's getting darker, so it's harder for me to see from home. At this point, I believe that this is all I have for the questions so far, Mayor. Thank you for your time, for the time.
Thank you, Trina. Cindy, I just wanted to thank you and your team for all the work that you've been doing. It's just marvelous work that you're doing in terms of keeping us operating in a way that we can with the finances that we have. Overall, you're optimistic in our revenues and expenditures. However, you do say that there's some uncertainty ahead that could negatively impact current projections. So my question is in terms of our sales tax. As you mentioned, those on our employment are no longer going to receive those $600 that they were receiving. They're not receiving any more stimulus funding of any sort, but yet they're still having to pay rent, mortgage, utilities, groceries, etc. So to me, that means that they're going to be spending less. And if they're spending less, there's less sales tax. And a few days ago, I heard that the grocery stores are reducing the cost of their products, which means also lower sales tax. So my question is, in terms of sales tax, how long is long-term before there's going to be a serious impact on us in terms of a sales tax?
So we get, as I just mentioned this morning, we get sales tax. We got our final payment for the June 30th quarter. Actually, we didn't even get the payment. We just got the information about the payment literally this morning. So we're always about 4 to 6 months sort of behind between when people are making decisions in the supermarket and when we get information about how their decisions are impacting our sales tax base. So it is actually, compared to some of our other taxes, is actually fairly quick. It's our fastest economic indicator. But like I said, it's probably about 4 to 6 months before we get good information that we can analyze and see what's really happening out there.
Oh, okay. So when in December, when you come back to us, you'll have a better sense of where we are with those sales tax.
Absolutely, because right, like I said, this what I have today is through June 30th, which was when everybody was still being floated by those extra unemployment benefits. Okay. So I don't think we have a good full picture quite yet.
Okay, so this is now time for public input. So I invite anybody from the public that wishes to speak to us on this agenda item. Please raise your hand.
Bernie, this is your time to speak. Please unmute your mic.
Yes, good evening. Yeah, I just want to uplift the questions, comments, and concerns that y'all provided in regards to addressing the digital divide that our community is experiencing, especially our students, right? I think I heard that the CARES Act, and correct me if I'm wrong, would be absorbed by the general fund. And so if that's correct, then in my in my thought process, the rental utilities and the digital hotspots or Wi-Fi should be like those appropriations of those funds should be used, a little more towards the community. And I just want to say that much. And yeah, just it just feels good to hear our elected officials be concerned with the the future of our students. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernie, for your comments. Anybody else wishes to speak, please raise your hand.
Ellie, this is your time to speak.
Yeah, I'd like to respond to the city council to this report. I never said y'all couldn't pat yourselves on the back. It just kind of shows how it just went over your heads. I was saying to the particular moment where we are asking you why Matt isn't responding to emails, why Matt isn't communicating with the public. Instead of saying, hey, Matt, why aren't you responding to emails? Then you guys turn around and pat him on the back. That is what I was speaking in regards to, not anything else. But you guys just took my comment and you made it into a running joke. And it's just so disheartening and so disrespectful that you guys get offended by my language, but not by what I'm trying to convey. This isn't my first time speaking to you. This isn't my fifth time speaking to you. This is my first time.
Point of order, please, Mayor.
Elizabeth, what is your comment on the budget?
Yeah, I think that you guys should allocate money to more community building. I think that you guys did a lot of cut from Parks and Rec before, and if we could go ahead and use money to build community, if you could use money for internet hotspots, whether it be for students or not, just in general, it's a necessity for people in our community to have. I think that you guys should care more about what community thinks about you because you are elected officials and you should care about what we think about you. I think that you should also, let's see, how more can I tell y'all how to be better at your job by making it talking about the budget? Maybe you guys should allocate you guys some time. I don't know. It's just so disrespectful the way that I was treated today, and no one seemed to really care. You guys just all continued to not care. And then I've spoken to you in so many different ways, right? But only when I'm mad do you guys are so disrespected, but you still don't do anything about it. Maybe when you look at the budget in December, you can think back to the many times community has asked you to give more money to our programs to help our unprivileged people, to give more money to help our farm workers because they're still working in this heat and in this smoke. Maybe allocate more money to some sort of, I don't know, some sort of program Matt can take in community building since it's his job, right, to communicate with us. And obviously y'all.
Mayor, on point, please. On point.
Yeah, I mean, it's about the budget, right?
This is specifically to give you the update.
Maybe you could
It is
allocate some
not for you to
budget
go
to
on
maybe
about
go
certain
ahead and caring
items.
about community. If you guys could go ahead and take some training on community input and how much you guys care about it. If you guys could break up the budget and put somewhere on there, that would also be cool. Thank you. This is my time, right? I can speak on it.
Thank
I
you.
think that you guys should use the budget to educate yourselves.
Thank you for your recommendations, Elizabeth. Moving on, is there anybody else that would like to speak to the council on the budget?
This is your time to speak.
Hola, buenas noches. This is Edgar Ibarra, calling in regards to just everything that was shared with us today via the Cindy. I think, you know, first and foremost, just a lot of the languages used when y'all are actually trying to break down the budget, it's very complicated. So I really want to ask y'all and ask the city to really make it more accessible for our communities. I want my grandma to be able to understand this. My grandma's around 70 something years old. She doesn't speak a lick of English. So making it accessible to her would be really, really important as we continue to want to engage our grandparents, our parents, all our residents in Watsonville. So really wanted to say that, but also really thinking about, you know, just what Bernie Gomez had mentioned around the digital divide. How do we bridge that? We're in such close proximity to Silicon Valley that it's embarrassing that we're having to deal with this. Our city, any city building should have free access to Wi-Fi. Any city park should have access to Wi-Fi. So making, and I know it's far-fetched, and I know y'all are probably thinking like, man, we want that, but let's really start thinking about that. Let's think outside the box. Let's use our imagination and creativity to actually be able to come up with viable solutions for our community. But rental assistance and utility assistance is going to be key. This update here is something that our communities are just facing, right? Everybody's family, I could bet you know somebody firsthand that's going through it. You know, at one point, someone's going through a job loss or something like that. So really uplifting that. So $660-something thousand to be reallocated into rental assistance and also utilities assistance in the bridging the digital divide is really important. And just once again, providing the adequate transparency around the budget as far as what's happening. Y'all are doing a good job, but hey, we can do even better. You know, and putting it in Spanish, and I know it's already hard to try and put it in English. How can we put it in Spanish and make it more accessible and legible for our older community members that don't really understand this language? Trina Kaufman pointed out and broke down the TOT. Y'all know this, but some of us don't. So being very transparent around the language used around the budget is very, very important, y'all. So I just really want to say that, and it's getting a little bit dark. And I know y'all putting it down, however y'all are doing it, but just want to reaffirm that, you know, it's a tough battle. And at the same time, we really got to budget our values. What do we value here? Do we value our community, or are we actually just valuing we just got to pass this budget and keep it going, right? So buenas noches.
Thank you, Edgar, for your comments. Is there anybody else in the community that would like to speak to the council on the budget? Please
Yes, Mayor. Citlali, is now your time to speak.
Good evening, everyone. I just really want to reiterate what Edgar just mentioned. You know, as a city, we really, you know, I'm sure you all encourage the community members to come to these meetings and participate, right? These conversations about budget really affect all of us. And I wholeheartedly agree that the language in which the meetings use is just unfortunately inaccessible sometimes. You know, I work for a nonprofit here in town, work with lots of other partners, and when we are creating campaigns for the community, that is the very first thing that, you know, comes in, you know, we take into consideration is the public going to be able to understand our language? And so if these meetings are also for the public, that should be the first thing that should also be taken into account. I understand that a lot of this language is legal. I understand that, you know, outside of these meetings, you all might be more used to using this language, but I think it's important that for future city council meetings, it is something that we take into consideration, because not everyone's literacy, you know, is up to par with those who work for the city.
Thank you, Cesar. Is there anybody else in the community that would like to speak to the council on the budget?
Steve, this is your turn to speak. Steve Trujillo.
Approving. Okay, there we are. Well, first of all, someone should give Edgar a prize because he has reiterated everything that needed to be said this evening. He's absolutely correct all the way down the line. And we need to recognize again that people like him are the future of this community, folks. And we need to listen to them because they understand the great difficulties trying to make a living, keep it all together, and trying to understand the incredible amount of legal jargon that our city attorney uses, and that frankly, it gets used way
What is your question or what is your comment on the budget?
Yeah, the budget is that, well, my question about the budget is, okay, we have the $663,000 that we're going to have be able to use as surplus. Are you be able to use for other purposes? And I agree that we need to use that money to meet every single thing that Edgar mentioned. And what we don't need to do is spend money on things that already are basically sufficient in terms of the amount of money they have and can get through the next fiscal year. So that's my comment. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Steve. Is there anybody else in the public that would like to address the council on the budget? Please raise your hand.
Mayor, I have seen another hand up, but I don't see it at the moment. Maybe the person changed their mind. So I just want to make sure no one else in the public would like to speak at this time. And if I don't see hands, I would say that you're welcome to move on, Mayor.
Is there anything in Spanish?
No.
Okay. Okay, we're going to move on then, bring it back to the council. At this time, I'm going to entertain a motion whether to approve staff recommendation, and that recommendation is a resolution amending the 2020-2021 budget to authorize $951,479.60 budget appropriation to the Risk Management Fund. I'll entertain a motion for that recommendation.
I believe Councilmember Gonzalez, Mayor.
Mayor.
Delio? Okay.
I'd like to make the motion to accept staff's recommendation for the fiscal year 2019, 2020, and 2021 update and appropriations of the $951,479 and 16 cents to the Risk Management Fund.
Okay, is there a second to that motion?
Councilmember Estrada, Mayor.
Okay, Paco? Okay, very good. So there's a motion on the floor made by Aurelio, seconded by Paco. Any further discussion on the motion? Paco? And then
Thank you, Mayor. And once again, I just want to extend my gratitude to Cindy and your whole staff for that remarkable for the presentation. It was timely, it was important, and I'm glad there's a lot of members of the community that are tuning in to learn about this. And I do want to just thank Edgar and Citlali, Steve, for bringing up that need to educate the community about the budget. There's absolutely, I think, besides the general plan, no other document that's as important for the city as the budget. And I think we had mentioned it also when we did adopt the budget earlier, that something like that would be very much appreciated and helpful. I know that Cindy's super swamped and the staff is super swamped, and that's something that we want the public to also know, and they're working hard. But and city manager, please, if we could do something in the future to just break some basic things down for the community. I think we're all better for it. So thank you, Cindy, for all your work. And thank you to the individuals that called in to voice their opinion.
Thank you,
Councilmember Estrada, if I could respond to that just really quickly. We did take that feedback to heart when the council originally approved the budget. And in fact, I've been working with Cindy and Tamara and our communications team to put together a budget in brief, which will be a condensed, summarized version of the budget in English and Spanish, because we do know that the budget, is 300 pages long. It's a very technical document for anyone, regardless of how many years of experience you have in local government. And so it is something that will be coming, and it is, we are working on it as we speak.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Matt. Lowell, I think you wanted to speak.
Thank you very much, Mayor. The budget is a complex document, and it's a fluid document as well. We change it, it changes, the conditions change all the time. We do need to make it more decipherable to the public. It's taken me years and years to understand how the budget actually works. And then, somebody at the state changes things all the time too. So it is what it is. Let's hope it gets better. Let's have the public participate as much as they can. And I just want to remind them to shop locally and pay their bills and their taxes and help improve their property and support local public education as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Lowell. Is there any, Aurelio, I saw your hand go up.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I just want to make sure that the public understands that tonight all we're doing is accepting the update and the appropriations. The 636,000, we will be addressing that in the future agenda items. That wasn't addressed tonight, and so stay in touch with us, communicate with us as a community. We're all accessible. The city council has city council emails. You can email us, or you can phone call us. Give us a phone call. We all have city phone numbers. So reach out, let us know. We are listening. So again, I just wanted to make sure that I clarified that for the public, that the CARES Act money that we're putting into public will be going to the general fund, and then we will be looking at that and how do we best use it for the community. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Aurelio. Is there another council member that would like to speak? Trina?
Thank you, Mayor. A couple points. Yes, I'm in finance, and it's still very complex. So those of you that are concerned about having an understanding about money, it is still always going to be complex, even for those of us that work with money day in and day out. So it is to try and break it down into little bits and increments and digest it as you can understand it. And it is a huge learning curve for anybody that just sort of stepping in here to see what's going on with a $160 million city budget. We've had a lot of discussion about back and forth what we're spending our money on and our expectations of the money coming in and going. But I'm looking at this topic as two different things. One is, yes, you're giving us the update of what's happening with the city dynamics. But we're looking at a $951,000 expenditure. And I'd like to know what that line item check cut would be for that's going into this appropriation fund, because it's going into the risk management. Let's have more conversation about this risk management money and how it's being spent, because I think what's happening here is we've rolled up spending this money in with, oh, here's your budget update. So as we're voting on this, it's not very clear to the public the transparency of spending $951 million, as we've had a very clear, robust discussion about where our money is and how things have, the expectations versus the reality. So let's be very specific. If you could please comment, this check for $951,000 that's being spent for this risk management, specifically what it's being spent for.
Cindy, can you address that?
Councilwoman Kaufman Gomez, that I'm happy to respond to that. This is an allocation to the risk management fund that is like Cindy explained, is part of a payment of a settlement for a workers' comp claim that was settled by our excess carriers. We are part of PARSAC, and our self-insurance retention, which is the equivalent of the deductible that we have in our insurance for workers' comp, is $150,000. The settlement of this claim was in excess of our self-insured retention, and it was agreed by our excess carriers to pay that settlement. And the city will be fully reimbursed for this settlement. So as Cindy indicated, we are allocating the expense as well as the revenue. So we will be 100% reimbursed by that payment after we make that payment, but we have to make it first.
Yeah, well, I so appreciate that, Tamara, because this is important for the community to know. If we're going to put $1 million on the line, where's this going to come from, and where's it going to go back to? Because this is our public tax dollars being spent here, and this public wants to know where the money's coming from, what it's being spent on, and how we're making to make the adjustments to our budget accordingly. So I really appreciate you clarifying that for the public's sake, for their understanding. So again, thank you very much for that, and for your time on this matter.
Thank you for asking that, Trina. Are there any other questions or comments on this motion? Seeing none, then I'll ask for a roll call.
Kaufman Gomez,
Yes.
Estrada,
Yes.
Gonzalez,
Yes.
Hernandez,
Yes.
Hurst,
Yes.
Garcia, Parker,
Yes.
Garcia.
Yes. Okay, the motion passes. Moving on now, we're going to move to consideration of approval, emergency assistance program and appropriation of $100,000 from the general fund to implement the emergency rental assistance program. Staff report doesn't tell me who the staff is, but I think, yes, Beatrice?
I want to check again to see if we have any Spanish speakers right now. And if we don't have any Spanish speakers, I'm going to let the interpreter go. So let me check. Si hay algunas personas que estén escuchando esta junta en español, por favor, usen el botón de la manita y levántenla, por favor. Queremos saber si todavía están aquí para poder seguir interpretando en español. Muchas gracias. Go ahead.
Okay. Staff report, I suspect it's going to be Carlos that's going to make that. Yeah, it is. Go ahead, Carlos.
Good evening, Mayor, Council, city staff, members of the public. I'm Carlos Landaverri. I'm going to see if my presentation works. Okay. All right, you can see it. Yes, so again, I'm Carlos Landaverri, the housing manager in the Community Development Department, making tonight's presentation. By way of background, on August the 25th, the City Council approved a temporary eviction moratorium and directed staff to develop an in-house emergency rental assistance program. The purpose of that program is to assist low to moderate income renters affected by the COVID-19 economic crisis. Now, you will recall that back in April, the council authorized $100,000 from the city's CDBG action plan to be provided to the Community Action Board to provide qualifying Watsonville residents with emergency housing assistance. Through that funding, we were able to assist 66 families. Funds were exhausted back in July. And so based on our experience in working with CAB, we are using that model for our new program, our in-house program. So our new program, it'll be administered by the Community Development Department, Housing Division, in collaboration with Parks and Community Services Department and our Finance Department. The eligibility requirements based again are modeled on our program with CAB. The program will be available to low or moderate income residents of Watsonville. The rental unit must be located within the city limits. The tenants must have experienced a loss or reduction of income due to COVID-19.
No, it's not. It's in here.
And have a
That's extended.
with no alternate means to pay. Priority will be given to tenants who are sick or have been sick with COVID-19 or are caring for a family member who is sick with COVID-19. Tenants that are experiencing a layoff, loss of hours, or other income reduction resulting from the COVID-19 or the state of emergency, or the tenants shelter-in-place orders, or if they're complying with any recommendations from a government agency. Also tenants that need to miss work because they're taking care of their homebound school-age children or to care for a family member that is deemed high risk. The application process will be very simple. We'll process them in the order we receive them. They will be funded on a first come, first served basis until funds are expended. Documentation required from our local tenants. They must have proof that they have a loss of income or a reduction of income. They have to have proof of residence, that they live within the city limits. They must have a copy of their lease or rental agreement, a copy of their driver license or a California ID. And we may also collect additional demographic information. And so with that, Mayor and Council, it is recommended that the City Council adopt a resolution approving the Emergency Rental Assistance Program in order to assist eligible residential tenants affected by COVID-19. Allocate $100,000 from the general fund for the program and authorize the city manager to make non-substantive changes to the program as it may be necessary for clarification and or compliance requirements. And with that, I will entertain any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Carlos, for that report. It's now time for City Council clarifying and technical questions, and we'll begin with Lowell. Are you there, Lowell? You're on mute, Lowell. We can't hear you, Lowell.
Unmute. There it is. All right, can you hear me now?
Now we can, yeah.
Thanks so much. You know, I was on the CAB board for a number of years, and I was a check signer, and so we signed a lot of checks for rental assistance and utility assistance and all kinds of things that the CAB clients needed. And so I think this is a very generous act from the city, and it's much needed, and CAB is a good steward of the public's money, and hopefully all this money comes right back into the community, and it's certainly the right thing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Lowell. Okay, we'll move on with Aurelio.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I have a question. Is AB 3088 is what the state passed? Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And according to that, the landlord needs to notify the tenant on their past due rent. Are we going to be requiring to have some of that documentation to be presented to qualify for receiving this funding? Are we going to incorporate that, in other words, to our program?
If I understand your question correctly, Councilmember Gonzalez, are you referring to the declaration of financial distress by the tenant, or a specific document that the landlord would have to sign with us?
No, the distress.
Okay. So we have, it would be, I mean, that would be one of the documents that we could require. Our program would require that they have some type of evidence that they have loss or reduction of income. And so having a declaration, a financial distress declaration, that would be one piece of document that we could utilize.
Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you, Aurelio. Moving on to Felipe. Are you there, Felipe?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
So are we going to do a campaign to let people know about this as well? You know, I think the main thing is, you know, letting people know about this program. And, you know, of course, obviously people earlier spoke about Spanish language. And I think it'd be important that we do really promote this program in a Spanish language. And, you know, I think that there's different outlets other than, you know, there's Facebook, but then there's also different social media outlets like WhatsApp that a lot of people use as well. A lot of Spanish speakers use WhatsApp that we could be using as a city, or maybe getting a third party to use that program, but also Spanish radio too. But I just wanted to hear your comments on how we're going to promote this program. Specifically with Spanish speakers and maybe even like Triqui and different indigenous communities.
Yeah, thank you for your question. So in regards to Spanish and the our campaign, we will be promoting the program through different avenues, including CAB, all of our nonprofits, the school district, all of the, you know, our normal channels, also social media, and we will count on you to help us disseminate that information. All the information we have right now, we already have it in English and Spanish. On the Thursday, the 17th, we will have a specific webinar on tools and resources for tenants, and we will include all of the available programs for our residents, including this program. We will have one webinar in English. Following that one, we will have one specifically in Spanish, so that we can have that connection. That's the level of commitment from the city to represent and promote our programs in Spanish. We don't have anything in Triqui, but we can look into that. And I know that we have a couple of other Mayan languages in the area, and we can work on that, especially if we have someone that can help us translate our materials.
Okay, thank you. Let's move on to Ari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for letting me say, I wish we had $1 million to put into this program and to support our community, as sure as we all do. I see the A, B, C, D, and E about all the different emergencies and things that could happen that people could, you know, draw on this and help it. I don't have any questions about this, Carlos. I think it was well presented. I think it's clear. And the only thing that I was concerned with is how people are going to get to know about it. But Councilman Hernandez asked about that. And so thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ari. Moving on to Trina.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I do have a few questions. You know, given what do you anticipate the average size of the grant to be?
Thank you for your question. So in the last program, our max amount was $1,500. The average subsidy amount was $1,288. So we're using $1,500 again and see how that would go. You know, within a month or so, we will know what's the need out there and how much we can give them.
And is a utility bill required? Because I know a lot of times with eligibility, it's not only the lease agreement, that you actually are on the utility bill so that they know that you actually are a resident there. Because there may be times where that may not be both connected. So are you going to require a utility bill that their name is on it for that property, or some other proof of occupancy?
We do. So under the documentation, there is a very ample room for documentation. So that could include copies of utility bills, cell phone bills, bank statements, anything like that that can prove their residency within the city limits.
The other thing that happens too is, you know, if it's a one-time grant for this family and they're going to you with this, where's the loop of the communication with the landlord? Because, you know, this might be a one-time grant that the city offers for somebody that's in a financial hardship, and it offsets a month's worth of rent. But is there anything that's going to go back to the landlord to inform them? I mean, not only the check being cut by the city, but to see what the landlord has the knowledge about of their tenant that may be in a bind situation. So how do we loop the landlord into the communication here?
We can. We started with the tenant, and that's I think that's what Councilmember Gonzalez was getting into. That if we have that communications from the tenants and also from the landlords, that the tenant has a financial distress declaration like the ones that the state has put out, then we can collect some of that from the tenant and also from the landlord. So we can attack it from both sides, and we can have that communication with the landlord. It also provides us with a very good opportunity to educate landlords about the programs and the eviction moratorium from the state and our local moratorium.
And I know that this is a fund that's allocated to the side of everything else that's going on legislative wise. How does this work together with the other ordinances in the state legislation when it comes to either eviction moratorium or any of the other tenant rights that are going on, so that we know that we're collaborating instead of competing and making sure that everybody's at the table on this?
So we had a webinar just last week to inform tenants and landlords about their rights and responsibilities under the new state law. And we will continue to do that. In all of our webinars, we'll start with that, the eviction moratorium restrictions, rights, responsibilities, so we can start educating both tenants and landlords. And we will also offer all of the resources available to our city residents. But if we have also residents from the outside of the area, we also work in local groups, jurisdictional groups that have similar programs, and so we can guide them in the right place. But our program, as Matt mentioned before, it would be to complement the other jurisdictions that are, you know, starting a little bit late, if you ask me. We started our program back in April, and we were up and running, and we expended our CDBG funds. After that happened, we shared all of our documents, our guidelines with other jurisdictions, including the County of Santa Cruz, the City of Santa Cruz, City of Capitola. And so now they're starting to use that process. And so they will be able to help their residents now. The county will be able to help residents in the unincorporated areas. And so we want to do our part so that we can also help residents within the city limits.
The webinars that you mentioned, are they pre-recorded? I mean, is it more for, how does the community know when to chime in? Is it a certain set time? Can they go back later? Because if people are working, they don't know what they don't know about a webinar. Maybe it's the property managers that are aware of it for some of the larger firms. But as Councilmember Hernandez had mentioned, how do we get that webinar material accessible out there for links? Is it on the website? Where can we divert people to for this webinar information?
We will have it on our website. We'll also post our PowerPoint presentations, and as they're both in English and Spanish. And we'll record them, we'll make them available to the public, and people can just go in and see them, watch them at their time in either language. And then we also have our contact info for the Housing Division, either by phone, by email, so they can also communicate with us in either English or Spanish, and we can get back to them. And all of that information is available for tenants and landlords, and we'll also have links to all of the resources, including the resources by the state of California.
You know, you're doing an awesome job. I just want to make sure that you know that I may be hard on you, but it's harder on you for a good reason, because I know you know the data, and it's just getting it out of you so that we can get it to this community. I think I have one last question, and that has to do with, we have 66 family members or households that benefited from it from the first cycle. Do you have them on a list so that they're not going to come on the second round? How do we make sure that there's equity with the remaining amount of funds available for other tenants that are experiencing this issue?
We have a list. We'll cross-reference them with CAB. We will also be working with all of our local nonprofits to see what the local need is out there.
Okay. And then my last question, Mayor, is there any possibility that we can leverage this amount of funds from any other sources so that we can actually have more funds available for our families that are in this need?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked. So we started with CDBG, and now funds from the general fund, that it gives us the greatest flexibility if we need to do anything to help more residents. But we're also looking into our next round from CDBG and our regular allocation from CDBG, depending on the need out there. And we will know that in the next few weeks, depending on what we have and what the need is, we can come back to council. We have a couple, we're always looking for more funding, but we have a couple of programs we can use. Excuse me, we can use our CDBG program, we can use our home program, and so if depending on the need, we'll come back to council and make some recommendations.
Thank you very much. I know that you're putting a lot of work into this for our community. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Trina. Moving on to Paco.
Thank you, Mayor. Carlos, thank you for the amazing presentation. Very informative as well. I know some of the efforts that we're doing. I know some of the efforts the county has been doing. Can we expect anything? Is there anything like a good prospect from the state, from the federal government? I know I seem to always ask this question. I'm always waiting for a miracle or something, but or is there anything happening on that front?
I'm gonna let Matt chime in on that one. I don't know of anything other than the second round of CDBG funds that we're waiting for any day now.
Yeah, I think that's right. There's still lots of conversation at the federal level of there being another round of stimulus funding, and a lot of consensus, I think, amongst economists that needs to happen. So never say never. At this point, it still looks fairly far out. So I think the best opportunity we'll have is the next round of CDBG funding, and potentially some additional CDBG funding that we can apply towards this purpose.
And we're still working closely with like Congressman Panetta's office to make sure that we can leverage whatever sort of anything that we can leverage to get funding.
Yeah, Congressman Panetta's office has been very helpful. We've been working with the League of California Cities and the National League of Cities, as well as the Conference of U.S. Mayors. Everyone's really been doing as much advocacy as they can. It's a tough year running into a November election, and so it's making it harder to get work through the federal legislature at this point in time. It's still possible, but at this point we can't bank on it.
Okay. Carlos, I don't know if you have this number off the top of your head, but from the time that our moratorium ended and that first round of CDBG funding ended to when the most recent moratorium was passed, and before this 100,000, do you have a sense of how many families were evicted from their homes in that sort of period when there was nothing for the families, or very little for families?
Yeah, so thank you for that question, Councilmember Estrada. It's very difficult because the courts are not taking any filings. Some landlords can do some filings, but we haven't had any evictions. What we have heard anecdotally is that landlords are using all types of strategies to get rid of their tenants. But I know of just a couple of cases that we have referred to CRLA and the Watsonville Law Center, where the landlords, either because they didn't know the rules or they don't care to know, they would violate, they wouldn't give proper notice to their tenants. But I just know of a couple of cases like that. The Judicial Council order was rescinded, but now the new state law, they have, the courts will wait until October so we can see evictions. I can tell you that from all the work that we've been doing with all of our nonprofits and in collaboration with all of the other groups, and especially from the housing task force meetings we've had, and in dealing with all of our local realtors and property managers, we know that within the city limits, we don't have that much. We have very little. And it's good, it's great to know that we have that there's communication between the landlords and the tenants, and they're working this thing out. We got a report from Kathy Oliver. She's a property manager, and she manages over 450 properties. They had, in that group, they had from March, they had 18 tenants that had fallen behind. And as of last month, only one person. All the other ones were current, and just one person was still behind. So I think that says a lot.
Carlos, for the benefit of the community watching, can you give a quick description of what CDBG stands for, what that program is?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Sometimes we forget. We get caught up in our terminology. So CDBG stands for Community Block Grant, and it's a federal program, and it's been in place for several years, for a very long time, and it was designed to give people financial resources so that they could improve themselves and pretty much just get them out of poverty. The city of Watsonville has been a entitlement jurisdiction. And so by that, the city of Watsonville receives an amount, an allocation every year, and we have to use their money to help our community. At least 70% of those funds have to be used to help low to moderate income residents within the city. So for example, in the downtown area, we use CDBG funds to fund parks and recs. We pay for their staffing because we know that we have a lot of low to moderate income youth that come to the center, and they come to get services there. So CDBG money pays for staffing so that they can provide those services to our low to moderate income residents. We also use that money for affordable housing. We can use it for economic development to either expand or help people start their own businesses. It's a proven mechanism to get people out of poverty. We also use CDBG funds to fund housing code enforcement issues. If we see houses or areas where we have dilapidated buildings, we can go in and help them repair them. So it was established like that. As a city, we have to have an action plan, annual action plan that the city council has to approve every year. And every 5 years, we must have a consolidated plan. It's a 5-year plan where we set our goals and priorities based on a needs assessment. And right now, our office is going through that mechanism. We started earlier this year, and of course, as you know, in March, everything changed. So that needs assessment, we're revisiting that, and so we can plan on our next 5 years. And every year we get an allocation. It's about $750,000 that covers some of the staff administration and programs that we can use to help our low and moderate income community.
Thank you for that explanation. Hopefully it was understood. I have a question actually that piggybacks on a question asked by Trina, and that is CAB was able to service 66 families for rental assistance. By having this program in-house, we're going to be saving $15,000 in administrative fees. So my question is, how many more families you think will be able to service beyond the 66 that was serviced by CAB?
So, well, if we do 66 and we have 15,000, if we divide that by 1,500, we can easily add another 10 families. It'll depend on the actual need. If we have, if our families need the max of $1,500, of course, we'll have a little less, but that'll give us some time so that we can look at different funding sources and expand the program if we need to.
Okay, so with that, it's time for public input. Is there anybody out in the public that would like to address this issue of the Emergency Rental Assistance Program? Please raise your hand.
Hello, everyone. This is Citlali again. I just want to thank Trina for asking those questions, so to get more clarity of just to give us an idea of how much families would be receiving. I appreciate that the city is doing their best to offer programs, where families are dealing with a lot. But I also want to put things into perspective for the community. Watsonville currently has a 17.5% unemployment rate. So taking that into consideration and our population, that's roughly 9,000 people who are either out of work completely or working reduced hours. And so, of course, it's always better to help, a few people out that we can, but again, it's just really important that we do as much as we can to provide families this assistance because it's really needed. And so I'm happy that Carlos mentioned that there could be a continuation of this program. But again, I really want to push you all to either add more funding to this, just so that we are really providing the assistance that our families need right now. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment, Citlali. Anybody else that'd like to address the council at this time? Please raise your hand.
Yes, this is Steve Trujillo again. Carlos, you did a very good job. Thank you for all your work. You have no idea how through this program and your intervention, you probably changed the lives of a number of people who live in the city who would be homeless. I also think we need to add more money to the grant, as many as possible, but simply because of the fact that every time we help somebody stay in their home, what that means is we have less disruption in our community. We also have fewer people who are wandering the streets with shopping carts or living under bridges. And to be honest with you, we really can't afford that. We have a relatively low socioeconomic index. The previous speaker, and by the way, you did a great job, just pointed out 17.5% unemployment. We really can't pass up any opportunity to keep families intact, living in their homes, and being able to live with dignity in our community. Because truthfully, folks, when you don't have that, your community starts to look like, well, Stockton did a few years ago when all those houses went belly up because they were repossessed, right, Carlos? So many of them went right up. So my point again is that if we can add money to it to help more than just 10 families who need help, I think it's worthwhile investment. $1,288 isn't a king's ransom, but on the other hand, that's going to cover rent for at least a month in a number of places that are not new, but are housing a number of people. And when I go out campaigning door to door, I'm taking a good look at code enforcement and places that are rentals that are not meeting city standard, and I will report them because I won't allow us to have wide numbers of poor housing units just because poor people live in them. That is not okay. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Steve. Is there anybody else in the community that would like to speak on this agenda item? Please raise your hand.
Mayor, I don't see any more hands up. I just see a lot of like phone numbers right now. I just want to make sure members of the public know that by pressing *9 is how you raise your hand if you're over the phone and you would like to speak. But
Come
I
on,
see
somebody.
none. So you're welcome to move on.
Okay, so I'll bring it back to the council, and at this time, I'll entertain a motion whether to approve staff recommendation, which is a resolution approving emergency rental assistance program guidelines to assist eligible residential tenants living within the city of Wattsville who have been affected by COVID-19, authorizing the city manager to make a non-substantive changes to the ERAP as may be necessary for clarification and or compliance requirements, and appropriating $100,000 from the general fund for the program. I will entertain a motion for that.
Also move.
Okay, so Trina moves. Is there a second to that?
I'll second it.
I didn't hear who that was.
Me, Aurelio.
Oh, Aurelio? Okay.
Good job, Aurelio.
It's seconded by Aurelio.
Hernandez. Finally, I got Hernandez.
So now, are there any further discussion on this motion? Trina?
A couple things. One is I'd like us to bring back to council the situation with the utilities and making sure that the communication is occurring and that we have a process in place when it comes to that, because if they're behind on rent, they may be behind on utilities, and we want to make sure that we have what package needs to take place, because a lot of this times it isn't just the rent, it's the rent and the food and other resources. So what we need to do is we need to know a more holistic approach when families are in need, and making sure that they have all of the resources available. And if there's deals going on with letting the landlords know, sometimes they can go back and help the tenants in those situations as well. So I want to make sure that we have something brought back with us that way. I also want a clarification. Matt, can you give us a clarification of what our unemployment rates are?
So we're always about a month behind based on the information that the Workforce Development Board gives us, which is by extension from the U.S. Department of Labor. The last numbers we got for the month of July showed a 12.4% unemployment rate. It's still a large increase from what it was at its lowest pre-pandemic, which was around 3.5. But at its peak, we were at about 20% unemployment, which I believe was around April and May. And we have seen that steadily decrease as the economy reopens.
Is there any way we can trigger this coming back to council sooner based on those numbers? You know, let's say if we're at 12.4, if it comes back to 14% or 15%, can we bring it back sooner for us to be relooking or reallocating funds to help out?
Well, when it comes to the housing assistance, I wanted to share too that we just got word late this evening and haven't had a chance to look at it, that Congressman Panetta had announced another round of CDBG funding for the Central Coast for COVID-related support. So there may be opportunities to expand this program in the future. And we know that the need is great out there. So it's something that we will continue to look at and bring back to the council as appropriate.
Okay, and I'm hoping that the task force is still continuing so that we can incorporate them in the conversation of this news and any kind of updates that could be helpful for them to formulate before it comes to council. Can we make sure that that's happening well in the process?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
Okay, is there anybody else that would like to speak on this motion?
Madam Mayor, I'd like to. Yeah, I just want to piggyback a little bit on what Councilwoman Trina Kaufman was saying. You know, the COVID and pandemic has brought forth a lot of the issues that we need to address as a community. And one of those issues is the difficulty of some of our residents to be able to pay the rent due to lost jobs or health, or even when their child gets sick and they have to stop working to attend to their child. We have residents like that. And I think it bestows us as a council to continue to looking at this and working with the task force and developing a long-term project for this funding, and not just an emergency resolution per se, like, just for the COVID section, but really looking deep and diving into how can we continue to fund this for the long term. And I think it would do good for our community, because we would have a resource that we can continue to use CDBG funding in a fashion that will best benefit the community. And thank you, Carlos, for that great report. I appreciate all your hard work.
Thank you, Aurelio. Anybody else like to make some final comments on this motion?
Hers.
Seeing none.
Hers.
Oh, yeah, Trina and then Lowell.
No, Lowell, Mr. Hurst, you can go first. You were.
Thank you very much. I won't take up much time. I've been looking at the CDC website. This is the Center for Disease Control, and they have a program, a moratorium, eviction moratorium. And one of the declarations that the recipients of the program have to state is that they understand that any false or misleading statements or omissions may result in criminal or civil actions for fines, penalties, damages, or imprisonment. I want to make sure that this money goes to the most needy of the needy, and I think we need to do all we can to help people get on their feet and stay on their feet. I just don't want, I know it'll be very, very tight criteria, but I want to make sure that those few scammers out there don't find a way to weasel in on this, and it really goes to the most needy of needy, which there are many. Thank you.
Trina?
Yes, it would also be helpful for us with the demographics, because if we can see trends in demographics of the types of jobs and professions that are most vulnerable, because we're going from purple to orange to, was it red to purple to orange to yellow? We're going to find there's certain types of professions that are probably going to get a harder swing on this open, close kind of situation. And I think that if we watch the demographics of the kind of unemployment figures we're getting, we may find that there's a certain demographic that is a lot more sensitive to this impact because of the open and closure versus a seasonality situation, or somebody that's a temporary worker that lost their job, or it would be very helpful for us to have a little bit more of the demographical data on those that we're trying to help that are most vulnerable, because we've always focused, this is an ag community. This is an ag community. This is where our employment comes from. These are our bigger numbers are coming from. But our ag are working. We have them out there. I think what we're finding is a different demographic than what we've had the discussion about, the conversation at this table. And I think that it's important for us as a council and as a community to have that conversation. We're probably finding a lot more of our tourism industry, a lot more of our little mom and pop shops that are cutting hair and doing nails. I think we're going to find a different demographic of the kind of help for the community members that are small businesses that are feeling more of an impact than the assumption that agriculture workers are the ones. I think that we're going to see a different segment of population probably come to the fruition or come to the top, that we're discovering that we need to provide more services to, which means our message might be a little different. So I just want to make sure that we're sensitive to the kinds of folks that are out there that are going to be needing more help, that may not be used to the system and where to go and ask for the help and the resources. So I'd like to keep that in mind as well when we're discussing putting money on the table, how to get the money out there, and the impact of those that are being affected by this COVID. Because it is a COVID. This is not a seasonality situation. This is a COVID situation. So it will be affecting, I believe, a different kind of demographic than what we're familiar with helping out. There's more people that are going to come forward that we haven't seen in a very long time. So those are my comments.
Thank you, Trina. Is there any, Paco and then Felipe?
Thank you, Mayor. I mean, this might be better suited for a future request item, but could we invite CAB and the rental assistance program to come in? And I would love to hear some of the stories that they've heard through some of the people that they've helped and some of the struggles that they've had. I think it's really important that we listen to some of these stories and really just, get a real sense of what's happening in the community, because, as people have been mentioning, COVID makes it really hard for us to come together. It makes it really hard for us to go directly to some of these neighborhoods. And so I would really appreciate maybe some sort of a Q&A presentation and just to really know what's happening in our community. Thank you.
Thank you, Paco. Felipe?
I just wanted to thank Carlos for all the work he did behind this. He's brought these items to us before the council that, take a lot of, he's been doing a lot of work. He's been bringing these items that are COVID related that are kind of, that protect people and that are kind of a safety net for people during COVID. So I want to thank Carlos for all his hard work. We're lucky that we got him from the county and brought him here to the city of Watsonville. Thank you.
Yes, very much thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to make some final comments on this motion? See none, I'll take a roll call now.
Carmen Gomez?
Yes.
Gonzalez?
Yes.
Estrada?
Yes.
Yeah.
Gonzalez?
Oh, yes.
Hernandez?
Yes.
Hurst?
Yes.
Parker?
Yes.
Garcia?
Yes, motion passes. This is wonderful news to our residents. Okay, we'll be moving on. There's no emergency items added to the agenda at this time. Request and scheduling future agenda items. Is there anybody that would like to request any scheduling future items? Felipe? Felipe, then Trina.
Yes, I'd like to see, maybe to see if we can get, Matt mentioned the Monterey MBEP, but maybe if we can get their component of the Monterey Bay, the consortium that they have that works directly with broadband issues, to do a presentation about some broadband issues here and the digital divide in the region, but more specifically in Watsonville, Pajaro Valley. Maybe if we can have some discussion with the school district about it as well, to see what the gaps are and see where we're at with that.
Yeah, we can certainly do that. I appreciate that. We work closely with MBEP and their tech committee, including Steve Bloom, who's really the expert on it. I'm sure he'd be happy to come and make a presentation.
Trina, did I see your hand? Go ahead, Trina. And
yes,
then
Mayor. A couple items that I'd like to see us bring forward. I was on a conference call with Monterey Bay, or it's actually Monterey County Regional Transportation Commission. It had to do about their rail and what they're doing about their rail. And a lot of it is so closely related to Watsonville, Pajaro, that it would be helpful if we also brought them on board with a presentation of what's going on with the North Monterey County Regional Transportation. Because not only do we have the rail there, we have what's going on with that will impact us coming back and forth over this bridge. So if we can get them on board to go ahead and provide us with a presentation, I think that would be helpful. And then we passed Measure Y in March, and one of the criteria was for us to go out to RFP on evaluating our fire departments, the stations of emergency responses. I'd like us to have a conversation of what will be incorporated into the RFP that we will then be able to go out and bid for, to make sure we're getting a robust amount of materials in the content that we're out to study with regards to the fire. I understand we've had the pandemic. I understand that we have the FEMA, but we can still be having the conversation as we go along and making sure that we're getting the criteria that we're out there that we want to study and measure. If we can have that brought back as well, please.
Thank you. Aurelio, did I see your hand?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I have two items. First item is I'd like to have the Parks Community Service give us an update on the intergovernmental use of the school sites at EA Hall. What's our projection of start time and programming for these sites? The other thing I'd like to have, if it's possible, to have the Flood Zone 7, the Flood Zone 7 brought forth to the council for a presentation on what status is going on. Besides Nancy Billich has given us a report, a little bit more in-depth information for our communities.
Okay, thank you, Aurelio.
Aurelio, Councilman Gonzalez, are you talking about the financial committee too, or are you talking about generally
The whole package.
The whole package, okay.
Is there anybody else that would like to request an agenda item? There's one that I would like to request. We've heard at several council meetings, and then listening to last week's planning commission meeting also, there was a lot of concerns about the technology we're using for these virtual meetings. And so I'd like to request for information why we're using this particular application and how it's meant to get the community more engaged. And so if I could have a request for that at a future meeting for information for our community to learn about why we're using what we're using and how we're using it. Okay. So with that, I don't see any other requests for future agenda items. I want to say we're at 9:13 and we're adjourning this meeting. This meeting's
And you all owe me a pizza now. Good night, folks.
Good night.